Yulunga, Yulunga, Yulunga. A very good morning, everyone, and welcome to this first ever National Allyship Summit. On behalf of the Fred Hollows Foundation, ANTAR, Australians for Native Title and Reconciliation, Oxfam, the Friends of Uluru, and the University of Wollongong's Woolyungah Indigenous Centre, welcome to you all. Yulunga. To all of you in person here at the beautiful University of Wollongong campus, and also the many hundreds of you joining us online from every Australian state and territory, Yulunga. As we arrived this morning, we were greeted outside by the most beautiful smoking ceremony. Thank you to Macca, Adam and Peter for making us feel so welcome. And as you entered this room, you were greeted by the sounds of music composed by University of Wollongong alumni Connor McNamara, also known as Maraki. For those of you joining us online, we have a guest book. We'd encourage all of you online and in the room to use the QR code to add your messages of support and solidarity in the guest book today. My name is Jeremy Lassick. With many of you here today, I was actively involved in the Voice Referendum's Yes campaign here in the Illawarra. And in the true spirit of allyship, following the shock of the referendum, I'm pleased to have played a small part in the creation this year of the Friends of Woolyungah Indigenous Centre here on the University of Wollongong campus. Our Friends' aim is to strengthen the strong bonds and friendships created between local Indigenous and non-Indigenous people here during the referendum campaign. Can I begin by acknowledging country? I acknowledge that country for Aboriginal peoples is an interconnected set of ancient and sophisticated relationships. The University of Wollongong acknowledges the custodianship of the Aboriginal peoples of this place and this space that has kept alive the relationships between all living things. The university also acknowledges the devastating impact of colonisation on our campus's footprint, and we commit ourselves to truth-telling, healing and education. As you know, today is World Allyship Day. It was created on the 8th day of the 8th month as a day dedicated to celebrating and promoting the power of allyship across the globe. On this special day, we come together to recognise the importance of standing up for one another, fostering inclusivity and building bridges of support and understanding. Thank you all again for being a part of Australia's first National Allyship Day Summit. And what a lineup of guest speakers, presenters and panellists we have today. Today we anticipate a day of sharing, exploring, challenging, supporting, and as happens every single day in this place, there will be much learning. To welcome us to country, it gives me the greatest pleasure to welcome an elder and icon from our local First Nations community. Dr. Auntie Barbara Nicholson is a Wadi Wadi elder, a leader, a teacher, an author, a poet, an advocate, and an inspirational role model. A woman whose thirst for knowledge and learning and deep commitment to justice has spurred her to great accomplishment. Auntie Barb is a Senior Honorary Research Fellow in the Faculty of Law at Wollongong University, and she is Wollongong's 2024 Citizen of the Year, the first Aboriginal woman to be given this great honour. For over 12 years, Auntie Barb has pioneered a program that has seen the writings of incarcerated Aboriginal men and now women, recently launching her 12th volume titled Dreaming Inside, Voices from the Junee Correctional Centre. Please welcome our truly remarkable Auntie Barb.
Good morning, everyone. And can I say it's just been the most absolute privilege to be invited to deliver a cultural welcome at this amazing event. I can't believe that the climate that we had on the 15th of October last year, the morning after the referendum, I can't believe that we've come to this so soon. I think it's just absolutely wonderful that we are being able to do this. Um, well, I think there's been enough Yolungas, so I'll forego that. Greetings, everyone. It's my very great privilege to be here this morning. I want to, before anything else, acknowledge the sacred land we are on now. I am a local Wadi woman. I was born on what we now call the mission, but it wasn't. It was an open reserve at Kurmadichi, which is just a few kilometres down the road for anyone who's from out of town. And Wadi land, we understand, was what we now know generally as the Uluru region. Wadi people have always been under the care and protection of their two grandparents, who are represented by the mountain behind the university here, which is locally known as Mount Kira, right, who is grandmother. And just down the road a wee bit, a few kilometres further south, is grandfather, locally known as Mount Kimbler. Right, so bear that in mind, that they are our spiritual guides and hand down the responsibilities for cultural maintenance to Wadi people. I want to pay respect to that very, very sacred land, regardless of how much has been built on it, mined out of it, felled in the forest, fished in the rivers and the lakes and the waters around. Regardless of all of that, regardless of all the industry, the commerce, the developments everywhere, the spirit is still in the land and cannot be taken out of the land. The spirit lives in the land, and I need to absolutely pay humongous respects to that. I want to pay respects too to elders past and present, not only Wadi elders, but all elders, all First Australian elders who live and work or visit and attend functions like this. Your contribution to bringing about a day like this, a forum like this, is inestimable. So to the First Australians, I want to pay respect. But then there's another group, the 37% who voted yes, the subsequent Australians. I also want to pay respect to you. It's what I call the subsequent Australians, all you who came after. Okay. And I think that, again, the contributions made by all of you to bring this about is just amazing. I'm absolutely in awe. I want to specifically mention a number of people. There's far too many on the list, and I can't remember you all, and I'm half blind, so I can't even see it all on the paper in front of me. So if I don't mention your name, it's not because I can't, I didn't want to. It's because I just can't see it. So tap me on the shoulder later. Auntie Pat Anderson, oh my God. I was so thrilled to know that she was going to be here. What an enormous force for good and for advancement. Tom Mayo, how wonderful to have Tom on board on this. A great advocate for a statement for the heart. I first encountered Tom, I think, in 2018 at the Gold Coast at a conference where he took the physical statement on tour and spoke at a number of places. And I first encountered him there and have done so on a number of occasions since, and I'll be very happy to meet up with him again. You know, the disastrous results of the referendum for the voice to Parliament in October last year just left me gutted. And I thought, at the time, on that night, I thought, well, bang, there goes welcome to country. How can you ever do that again? When 63% of the country said, we don't want you. And I thought, that's it, I'm never doing another welcome to country, even though I had actually 4 separate occasions already booked on this campus, apart from a number outside of the university. And I thought, no, I'm just going to cancel them all. Anyway, the next morning, after having a fitful sleep, I thought over all of those events of the night before, and I thought, how could it be? All the work that we've done, and I'm an old activist frontliner from way back with a particular interest in deaths in custody. And I did a lot of work and still do a lot of work on that. But, you know, all of that work we did, all of the advancements we made with Link Up New South Wales, getting the bringing them home report done, eventually getting the apology for the stolen generations. All sorts of things happened that have been done, and all that work we've done has just been turned back. And we have to start all over again with so many things. And I can't think of a better forum than this to begin that journey. I think I turned my head around and thought, after that night, thinking about doing welcomes. And I thought, with all that work we did, we have to start doing it again. Okay, my instinct was to not do any more welcomes. But then logic took over. How could we not? Because to not do it keeps us invisible and pays into the politics of hate and discrimination. So I decided that I would welcome all those wonderful people, the 37% of Australians who voted yes. And for the ones who did not vote yes, I'd invite you to sit down and debate with us and let us deprogram you, because you really need it. It's time to ochre up. I'm hopeful that this summit will bring about some wonderful, wonderful things to guide us on our way forward. And I'm sure it will. There's a lot of brain power, there's a lot of commitment, and there's a lot of love in the room. Thank you to our allies. You 37% of allies, you're good. The word Woolyungah doesn't mean welcome, it means you can come in now. So Woolyungah. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you to Annie Barb for your welcome. Again, truth teller, activist, leader of allies, and an inspirational woman. I too would like to acknowledge country, for it interconnects everything, all of us, and all living things. I'm Jamie Beveridge, a proud Bindal woman from far north Queensland, with Scottish ancestry, both proud warrior lineage. Today we come together to discuss and deepen our understanding of allyship and to explore how we can collectively support the Voice, Truth Treaty post-referendum. I was asked what our goal for the summit is. Quite simply, it's to foster synchronised dialogue, build stronger relationships, and to inspire action towards social justice and equity. What today will do will also illuminate the strength and the ability of allyship in action. Call it serendipity, or as I say, work of our ancestors, my ancestors. I was introduced to the powerhouse, Holly Edwards, in a meeting that had nothing to do with allyship. It was in a completely different context here on campus. And in her introduction, she just noted quite altruistically that she was the secretary for the Allies for Uluru. I leaned in and asked Holly if we could exchange emails. Later that afternoon, the amazing Catherine Moyle, again in one of her conversations, mentioned that she discovered that there was an International Day of Allyship. Holly and I then got together. As we had established a family here in the Illawarra that were allies, that were activists and were campaigning week in, week out, daily around the referendum. These people had become family. We'd discovered a whole new network, a whole new community, one that it was hidden, and we were richer for that. So here we are, the 8th of the 8th, creating what I hope will be an amazing day. A day where we hear from inspiring individuals, a day that will activate the fire in your spirit and reinforce that spirit and the power and a shared hope of being an everyday, lifelong ally. I encourage everyone here today and online to actively engage in the sessions, ask questions and share your thoughts. This can also be a day for healing. The summit is an opportunity for us all to learn from each other and to develop actionable, meaningful commitments that will drive change in all of our communities. I'd like to pay a special thanks also, and I'm not going to name people, except for one, Tammy Small, who has carried the water for UOW and really was the glue to put all this together. For the speakers, the organisers, and for everyone in their organisations, we had such a tiny budget, but we've made this happen. Today, I challenge you all to commit yourselves to ongoing action. Now, Amar was supposed to be here, and I don't see him in the audience. So I'm going to shift over back to Jeremy, who is the MC for today. We will break into groups later this afternoon, and we'll hopefully get Amar back up to do his opening address. That's all I have to say. It was pure chance that we were able to bring everybody together today. But like I said, I think it's the work of our ancestors and the work that's been carried on from the people that carried the water right through the referendum process. And this can be a healing space for all. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jamie, and thank you to Auntie Barb. Auntie Barb, for decades you've led the struggle. You've reached out to and inspired people in the greatest need. And in the spirit of truth-telling, you've shared stories that need to be heard, but would never have seen the light of day without your passion and your commitment. Jamie, to you and the University of Wollongong, thank you for hosting us today, and thanks for inviting us to be friends of Woolyungah. It gives us the greatest honour and privilege, not only to be your allies, but to be your friends. Our first keynote today is from Auntie Pat Anderson AO. Pat is an Uluru woman known nationally and internationally as an advocate for the rights and health of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. She is the Uluru Dialogue co-chair. Pat has extensive experience in Aboriginal health, including community development, policy formation and research ethics. She was appointed an Officer of the Order of Australia in 2014, a Human Rights Medal, and she's received a NAIDOC Lifetime Achievement Award for distinguished service to the Indigenous community as a social justice advocate, particularly through promoting improved health and educational and protection outcomes for children. Please welcome Pat Anderson to speak about Uluru Statement from the Heart, the journey forward.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank Barb for her generous welcome to her country and acknowledge her and all the other traditional custodians and other First Nations people that might be in the room today. And I also honour our friends who aren't First Nations people, but nevertheless are Australians, very strong ones. I'm going to be talking about you. Most of my talk today is going to be about you. First of all, I want to thank you for the chance of speaking to you today. It's been quite a week with some of the comments coming out of Garma. In case you missed it, the Prime Minister on Sunday seemed to walk back his support for the Makarrata Commission. He said, and I quote, "What we have proposed is Makarrata just being the idea of coming together, and that," I quote again, "it might take different forms as it evolves." There was quite a lot of press about those comments. The establishment of Makarrata was an election promise, and it is much more than a get-together. The Makarrata called for in the Uluru Statement is a bricks and mortar body of historic stature. Since the PM's comment, Senator Malandiri McCarthy has urged calm. She said, quote, "We're not moving away from our commitment to the Uluru Statement from the Heart in terms of our love and support for all of those who gathered at Uluru in 2017, unquote. What I can say is that we're certainly getting a sense of deja vu, that familiar feeling when retail politics and short-term thinking start to motivate the abandonment of a key Indigenous reform. I worry that we will see the Makarrata baby thrown out with the referendum bathwater. I hope I'm wrong. But we have seen that politicians can be fair weather friends. And when I see that, it makes me all the more grateful for our steadfast allies. Groups like Allies for Uluru. The work that your group contributed to the cause of Yes was significant. Every event, every volunteer, every conversation, every sign, and every special social post, it all made an impact, far and wide. This is such a diverse, broad group, from nurses to religious groups of various denominations, to universities, to charities, mental health advocates, disability groups, and just the man and woman next door. I think it's rare for such a varied collection of entities to be under the one tent. Well, rare for us anyhow. To me, there was always evidence that the ask was a very basic human one. The existence of groups like Allies for Uluru made me believe that perhaps yes was something most of us could agree on. Of course, that wasn't the case. The result did not go away, and it hurt. This was a heart-wrenching loss. The last 10 months have been a real struggle for me and many of us across the country. There's nothing to be gained from pretending otherwise. I'm sad and I'm angry. We worked so hard, and I'm not just talking about the referendum campaign itself. This work extends years back to the Uluru Statement from the Heart in 2017, back before that to the years of consultation that went into the statement. The Uluru Dialogues were the deepest consultation with First Nations people in its history. We have been advocating for rights since almost the arrival of the First Fleet. Generation after generation after generation have had a go, seeking structural reform, seeking justice, seeking a place in our own country. Other attempts took more than a decade. 12 years of conversation were invested into this simple, pure idea that was formally put to the Australian people. And we had to watch as that simple, pure idea was misrepresented and distorted. We watched as the spirit of Uluru was buried under lies and disinformation. We watched as honesty evacuated from some sections of the media. The honesty of politicians that was already in short supply, unfortunately, and we watched it dwindle further. We watched as democracy itself seemed to buckle, as social media seemed to supercharge the most polarised, virulent and inaccurate perspectives. We watched as zealots got wildly creative with some of the imagined consequences of a voice to Parliament. Everything from blackfellas setting interest rates at the Reserve Bank to charging, if you like, every time you went to the beach. But you know, this wasn't new. We heard all of this at the native title debate many years ago, when people were saying things like, this is true, that we were going to take everybody's backyard, but not only that, we're going to walk off with the hills hoist as well. So that did happen. Anyhow, so, but this was supercharged, as I said, by all of the devices that we have now in the 21st century. But like so many things in our history, the idea was taken from us and reshaped into something else. That idea, based on simple human decency, was taken and misconstrued in 100 ways, some unintentional, but many intentional. One of the greatest distortions was the notion, repeated ad nauseum, that mob did not support the voice. That's not what our research told us leading up to the referendum, and now that the dust has settled and the votes have been counted, let me finally put that to bed. We spoke to people, we knew what our mob wanted, and we were desperate for change. And I think even the no voters, many of them would agree that what we, the nation state, has been doing over all these years hasn't worked. Not to fiddle and tinkle at the edges. This was an attempt to get real structural reform so it would make a difference in a positive sense. First Nations people overwhelmingly across the country voted yes. The vast majority of First Nations people saw the merits in the voice. We have nowhere else to go, for goodness sake. You know, thinking bit of money here, bit of money there, and the same thing's happening again. Not all, of course. Some said it didn't go far enough. I'm talking about our mob now. Not all, of course. Some said it didn't go far enough, but they were a small minority. They were very loud, and as they were amplified by sections of the media, but they were also a small minority. Our own Uluru Dialogue research suggested that 83, this is before the election, of First Nation people supported the voice, and that was verified on October 14th. In remote and regional areas, the yes vote was over 80% in most ballot boxes. In some of Australia's most remote areas, the yes was even higher. I'm quoting from what I know, because I'm from the Northern Territory. What I recorded 92.1% yes. Maningrida was 88% yes, and in the Tiwi Islands it was 84% yes. These are large communities, some of them very isolated, but nevertheless, they knew certainly what they all came to. Many of them came to the regional dialogues. It was their idea. What's lost in the tsunami of all of this misinformation is that because nobody couldn't hear our voices at all, we just couldn't compete. I was also co-chaired the Referendum Council with Mark Liebler, and was Julia Gillard started this, as I said, 12 years earlier. But the Referendum Council set up, and we had 5 terms of reference. And the first one was, we had to go out and ask our mob how they wanted to be recognised in the Constitution. It was a given. It wasn't something we made up out in the bush. It was a given from the government of the day. In fact, the coalition. Mr. Turnbull was the Prime Minister. Then they set up the council that's trying to deal with this issue, which has been a bit of a thorn in our side. We can see if we can resolve it. But clearly, we must have come back. We did with the wrong answer. But for those of us in those sorts of numbers and across the country, the voice was a way to cut through the people who speak in anecdotes, those who speak on behalf of our communities and our families and claim to know best, the self-appointed and the bureaucrats. Of the 20 remote polling booths in the Northern Territory, only one recorded a no. During the campaign, there was a lot of airtime given to voices claiming the opposite. They were so wrong. For our mob, it was crystal clear. It was a crystal clear yes. The overall result was a no, but it was not crystal clear. It was complex and multifaceted. That's what our research tells us. In the absence of any real analysis from government or the media, we're doing our own. There isn't one reason. We have to look beyond the obvious or the simplistic explanation. But we may as well start with that one, racism. It absolutely propelled one section of the no vote. No serious person can claim otherwise. There is a certain segment of the population, mostly of a certain generation, that thinks us blackfellas have gotten too big for our boots. The type of person who booed at the footy, the type of person who sees a welcome to country as some kind of affront. This type of individual saw the referendum as a chance to remind us who's boss. Racism is a despicable attitude, but the good news is that those voters represented a fairly small minority of the no vote. Our research indicates that around 15% of no voters were primarily motivated by racial identity, 15%. There's still 15% too many, of course, but 85% of the no voters was driven by other factors, which are, as I said earlier, complicated. Much of this was driven by the disinformation I mentioned earlier, but also its more benign cousin, misinformation. A lot of Australians don't have a good grasp, unfortunately, of civics, which made it difficult for them to grasp the matter at hand. There was, unfortunately, again, which was a big surprise. There was a knowledge and education gap. The lack of bipartisanship was also a factor. Some people will just always vote in line with the leader of their political party. There's no doubt that a coalition endorsement of the voice would have helped the yes vote. But again, it's not the sole reason that we came up short. We need to understand every facet of no if we are to move forward. Otherwise, we remain frozen in time, unable to progress. These issues are always a dialogue, and if you're not speaking loudly, our message will be drowned out. So we're continuing our research and we'll share analysis in due course as it comes to hand. Analysis on why people voted no, but equally important to remember is what they voted no to and what they didn't vote no to. That's unclear, really unclear. They did not vote no to truth-telling. They did not vote no to treaty. They did not vote no to constitutional recognition. They voted no to a constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament. Not all of these other things. It's all getting conflated now. We can't allow the referendum to cast a shadow over these powerful ideas. We have already seen evidence that some voices intend to do just that. Some coalition messaging has suggested that the Australian people have given their verdict on this entire set of proposed reforms. Anything to do with blackfellas, now you say no, because you have a mandate from the referendum, is how the logic of that kind of thinking runs, and it's everywhere. We've had the Daily Telegraph claim that Makarrata was implicitly rejected on October the 14th. We didn't go to referendum on the Makarrata. At best, this is an appalling misunderstanding of what voting is, what democracy is. At worst, it is intellectually dishonest, deliberate attempt to falsely extend the reach of the no, an effort to inflict some collateral damage from the referendum. So it continues. A referendum that was very clearly, very explicit about an enshrined voice to Parliament, and that alone, that was the only thing you voted on, none of the others. We must keep our eye on the ball, making sure that other reforms, First Nations reforms, remain at the centre of the national conversation. We need to refute the spirit of the Uluru. We need to resurface the spirit of the Uluru Statement from the heart. It was lost in the political debate. Well, debate's too grand a word, actually. This message of peace and hope was completely drowned out by polarised rhetoric, misunderstood, and even worse, misrepresented by those seeking personal or political gain. The irony of First Nations people offering an olive branch, only for it to be labelled as divisive, whilst the other side actively fought our request for representation and does so in the name of unity. You know, we suffered months of being told that the voice to Parliament was divisive and it was racially based. Well, I know it's not going to be news to a lot of you, but we have lived our lives in a divided and racist country. Some examples from my own family, and every Aboriginal person in the country has stories even worse than that. You know, it was public policy of the day not to teach my mother to read and write. And when I was, we're from Darwin, growing up in Darwin, and when I was at school, there was only one job that was available to me, and it was told to me many times loud and clear, is that I would be a cleaner. Nothing wrong, of course, with being a cleaner, but that was the only option that was available to me. So, and going to the pictures, we used to call it the pictures then, movies to those of another generation, at the local cinema, we had to go, we couldn't come in the front door, we'd have to go to the side door, to not a door, a window, where they'd sort of poke the ticket through a wire grill and then walk down the front of the screen and sit on these forms. And all the non-Aboriginal people sat behind us in those, they weren't called director's chairs, but what you call director's chairs now, when we were all sitting in the front on the forms. We thought it was great because we used to take our blankets and our pillows and lie down. And I remember as a kid looking behind and seeing all these people sitting in the chair, think, I don't know why they don't come down and lie down with us and be comfortable watching the pictures. But you know, the whole country is full, and you know, all the policies are based on race. I mean, the taking of children, every single thing, and have months and months being told that we were creating division in the country based on race. I mean, for goodness sake. It's just, anyhow. I have to imagine that better engagement with the statement would have helped. Just 1/4 of yes voters have read it. I found that shocking. I really did. Have you all read it? I hope so, because there's going to be a test outside before you leave. We need people to understand the intent. The generosity and sense of belonging that sits at the centre of it has never been about us and them. The statement was about charting a path forward, one where all we belong and to our own country. It was a offer of love, an offer of hope, and an offer of healing our country. We need to land that message with a new messaging framework, a framework that will be effective in a very challenging environment. Never has the political climate seemed so unstable, with social media fueling polarisation around the world. It's not just here, it's global. Never have Indigenous policies been so ineffective and so in need of reform. Never have politicians and the media been able to lie with such impunity, eroding public trust in institutions. It's okay to tell lies now. You can say and do whatever you want, then it's all okay. There's no boundaries anymore. There's nothing. I mean, anyhow, sorry. I'll get back to my words written here. Despite these headwinds, we're staying true to Uluru. We are compelled to do so by our 6.2 million friends. How could we give up on a voice with that kind of movement behind us? How could we give up on constitutional recognition? Not that we were ever going to, but we've never had 6.2 million friends, ever. The path to meaningful constitutional reform for First Nations people has been a long one, and last October was a huge setback. But we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. This is our place. We've been here 65,000 years plus and more. As the scientists' tools get more sophisticated, that date keeps getting back older and older. So 65,000 years plus is a long time. So we ain't going anywhere. This is our place. And I don't mean this isn't yours either. We offer to share it with you in a real meaningful way so as we don't disappear off the face of the earth in another 50 years. It's that simple. But we're going to continue. But like I say, we never had so many friends before. We believe in the enduring importance of constitutional recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We have seen so many policy initiatives over the years. They all have been at the mercy of the ebb and flow of politics. The Constitution is the big law, and our mob know that. They didn't know, hadn't read the Constitution, but they knew that Australian society was governed by this big, we know about law, by these big laws. And they said to us at the regional, let's use their law. They have to listen to their law. Well, they did, but anyhow. And this idea of the big law is one that transcends the present government and the present minister. And that's why our mob knew what they were doing at Uluru. They gifted the Uluru Statement to you, the public, to be a people's movement, because governments don't change the Constitution, you do. You have the power. You have the power. That's our kind of democracy that we have in this country. For the most part, Australia's Constitution is not a bad one. It just doesn't include us. How could this country's foundation text omit the people who have inhabited it, as I said, since millennia? We believe we didn't come here. We actually came up from the earth. We didn't sail here or walk across a land bridge. We don't believe that. We believe that we came up out of the earth. So we shouldn't give up until at least you get that really profound fact. We have to keep making our case, even at a time when the political and media circus has moved on and left us in the dust. We have to maintain our sense of hope. So, what gives us that hope to continue this work? The short answer is you. The referendum gave us a gift, 6.2 million friends we didn't know we had. Our lives give us hope. We are so thankful we forever bonded. 62 million people, that's a movement. That's a movement, and that's what it's going to take. Can't rely on the media. We can't rely on our politicians. But, it really is truly more than ever up to us. This group didn't exist before the 14th of October. Active supporters of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs have never been identified on this scale. They may have been out there, but we didn't have to identify them. And now we have through our voting statistics. So, in all this bleak picture, and it is bleak, there's a silver lining. We've never had so many people on our side. We have to continue to yarn with you, and over time we have to grow this group of people even bigger. Partly that will come naturally, but with demographic changes over time. But we can't rely on that. The demography of the Australian population is changing. The biggest group of people coming into Australia and living here are, in fact, from Southeast Asia, from India. Practically, we need a way to get in touch with them that isn't reliant on the media. So data-based building's at the top of our agenda. Not very sexy, but it's important. And if there's something this room can help us with, that we'd be ever so grateful. Emotionally and politically, we need you all engaged. We need to heal together, learn together, chart a path forward together. Probably, most importantly, we need to persuade people to join us. We won't do that by alienating people, saying that things like, and you've heard it, either you're with us or you're a bigot. I'm not sure that's ever changed someone's opinion. And we have to believe that opinions can change. We can get people to change their opinion, but not by that kind of method. Let's assume positive intent, and appeal to all of our higher selves. Let's really talk, and more importantly, really listen without making assumptions or casting aspersions. Let's transcend the toxic melee of politics. We're all in this together, and I think the future of what kind of a society we are rely on this moment now in time. We're all in this together and we're going to face challenges. Look at climate change. Oh, goodness me. Look at climate change, for instance. If we're going to overcome and save the planet, indeed our own country, we all need to do it together. The country must, our country must be at peace. The old people spoke about this, the regional dialogues. We are tired. We want peace. And that's why they came up with that wonderful idea. Every word in the Uluru Statement we heard across the dialogues, and we put it together. And it was their idea to go for a voice. We've tried everything else, but they're all doing the same thing again, the government is. We've had so many, we've got organisations, we've been back to Parliament time and time again. We talk to the politicians over generations, have been there a little bit of change. To say there hasn't been any change, that's not true. There's been lots of changes, but they're so hard won and take years and years to actually come in. And we've got to do it now. Otherwise, we won't be a discernible group in 50 years. It's really important for the country that we come to terms with each other in a sophisticated way. It's going to require a level of sophistication to move this forward. We have to come up out of the baseness which we've just experienced since and are experiencing since 14th of October. You know, what we did across the country, unbeknown to each other, we've only learned about it more recently, but the 14th of October was a Saturday, as you know, but on the Monday, many of us around the country decided not to send our kids to school because it was too dangerous. My own family, I've got two grandnieces, but their parents kept them home. Some people kept their kids home for a week, some for two or 3 days, but because it was dangerous to send them to school. There needs to be unity in the true sense of the word, not the bastardised meaning from the referendum. The kind of unity I feel in this room today, simply by you guys turning out and what you're continuing to do. With you, the Allies for Uluru. Once again, I thank you for your support leading into the referendum, and thank you for your ongoing support, staging this event as well. It means so much. When the cavalcade moves on, and it has, that's when you learn who your real friends are. And I have to say, there's a room full of friends today, and thank you. I feel you're all firm friends indeed, not fair weather ones. This is not fair weather. This is really, really hard now, really hard. Together, we represent a people's movement, one that will forge onwards. Our nation missed a great opportunity on the 14th of October, but as I said earlier, we're not going anywhere. We will identify the next opportunity, the next path forward to a more just Australia. We all deserve that, a just and equal society, and a civil society, for goodness sake. Anyhow, we'll all walk that path again, but this time maybe with even more friends. And thank you for turning out today and continuing to be involved in this movement for peace and honour and integrity in our own country.
Wow. Thank you, Auntie Pat. You are a true inspiration. You have been for decades and you will be forever. And you're right, we're all in this together. That's what this is all about. 10 months ago, there was a tsunami of misinformation. But starting today, with your leadership and the support of allies, let's create a tsunami of information through truth-telling and trust and the chance to close that gap. Even strive to eliminate the gap. Maybe not in my lifetime or yours, but it's something worth striving for. Would you please, again, thank Auntie Pat. I'm just looking for guidance from the back of the room, whether we have a special presentation. Is there a thumbs up, Tammy? Okay, a little treat for you. Just to prove you're never too young to be an ally, I'm going to introduce a wonderful local group who go by the name of Kids Uni. Each morning, these children engage in a daily commitment to country, acknowledging the local Aboriginal people, the land, the animals, and the waterways. Throughout their day, educators reflect back on this acknowledgement during their interactions with the children to ensure their actions align with the commitment we all make to take care of country each day. In a very short moment, when we see their little legs arriving, I'd ask you to welcome the wonderful kids from Kids Uni for their acknowledgement of country. In the meantime, can I remind you to use the QR code to upload your photographs and your messages of great support for the Allies movement. So without further ado, this movement at the back. They're in the room. Would you please welcome the wonderful kids from Kids Uni here at the University of Wollongong. As I say, you're never too young to be an ally.
Come in close to the microphone. All right, are we ready?
Yes.
1, 2, 3.
Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, custodians of this land, custodians of this land. We respect and learn from them. We respect and learn from them. The stories they tell, the stories they tell. Care for country, care for country. Love our land, love our land. Plants, birds and animals, trees from the background. Hand in hand, together we stand.
Well done, girl. Beautiful singing.
One more time. That was just the warm-up.
Now our reconciliation. Ready for our reconciliation?
At Kids Uni, we like to say thank you to all of our Aboriginal people for caring for the land. We promise to look after the land and the water and the animals and the people too. Here is Mother Earth, here is Grandmother Mountain, here are my friends,
And lovely big smiles as well.
Thank you very much to these wonderful group of young people, the Kids Uni Kids. Thank you. Thank you. Delegates, it's time now for our first panel discussion. And can I ask our panellists to join me on the stage? The topic for our first panel discussion is Voice, Treaty and Truth. And joining me on stage are leading voice advocate and author Thomas Mayo, researcher, advocate and author Professor Bronwyn Fredericks, the CEO of Just Reinvest, Jeff Scott, and from the Fred Hollows Foundation, Jackie Adams. And our facilitator for this session is the National Director of ANTAR, Blake Cansdale. When Blake took on his new role early this year, he said, "No choice but to lean into various uncomfortable spaces, even charging into them at times." And that's what I hope this panel will do this morning. Please join me in welcoming Blake and our first panel to discuss Voice, Treaty and Truth.
Yamamalia. I'm Blake Cansdale. I'm a proud Anouan man, but I've spent most of my physical, conscious life on the beautiful Darkinjung lands and waterways on the central coast of New South Wales. I will say, given what was just said about my introduction as National Director of ANTAR, I was a little bit nervous coming into my first panel facilitation until those gorgeous little jargons just got up there, and I completely forgot everything I'd planned to say. I was in tears then. I'm missing my little ones, so how beautiful is that? I do, though, have to firstly acknowledge that we're on unceded Aboriginal lands, and I absolutely want to acknowledge the welcome to country from Auntie Barb and thank Aunt for ensuring us safe passage while we're on her country. Equally, I want to thank Auntie Pat for that really cutting keynote speech and really leaning into some really timely truth-telling about this position that we're in post-referendum in terms of moving forward with the Uluru Statement from the heart and together as a movement of the Australian people towards a better future, which I won't take up much more time because the biggest thing that I'm honoured right now to be involved in is to be on a stage with these deadly First Nations leaders who have all had key roles to play in getting us to where we are today. And I'm sure everyone that's participating today is really keen to hear their thoughts on moving forward. So the key focus of the yarn will be about the core elements, voice, treaty and truth of the Uluru Statement, in particular, allyship. So how the 97%, the majority of the Australian community can support the continued full implementation of the statement. Before we dive into that though, perhaps introductions, if everyone doesn't mind introducing yourselves quickly and just perhaps your own personal reflection on the Uluru Statement and what it means to you, just to give us a bit of an anchor for the ally-based conversation.
Kapu Miki Bathanga, good morning, acknowledged country, Thomas Mayo. I'm Assistant National Secretary of the MUA, and I was at Uluru with Auntie Pat and over 250 of our mob from around the country. To me, it continues to be the most powerful, most eloquent and succinct document in this country, set of words that go through the history of before to this very date and what needs to change. And it is no less common sense and important for us to achieve, and it continues to mean a lot to me.
Hi everyone, Bronwyn Fredericks, and I'm a Guru Murray woman from Southeast Queensland. I do want to say how wonderful it is to be back on Thurl land again. I was last year in November and visiting also the University of Wollongong, where I had a warm welcome then and a warm welcome today too, and the last couple of days. So I do want to thank people. I got involved, first of all, just reading the material about the Uluru Statement, and then got involved personally in the campaign, attending meetings, and undertaking some leadership roles myself. I do want to acknowledge members of the Uluru Dialogues who are here, but also maybe online, and the heavy lifting that they all did in many, many communities. Arnie Pat Anderson and Professor Megan Davis, along with, I can see, some of the Uluru youth here, and the work that they continue to do. So I want to acknowledge that too here this morning. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jeff Scott. I'm currently the CEO of Just Reinvest. I was the director of the Uluru Dialogue, and before that I was the director of the Referendum Council. So I've been involved in this for quite a while. The Uluru Statement has not been diminished by what's happened in the past 8 months. I think it's been actually enhanced. We now have a defined 6.5 million people who are supporting it, and we have an ill-defined 9.2 million people who need to be educated. That's the task in front of us. So the task is there. It's as vital today as it was a year ago, and I did look forward to the conversation today. I'd like to acknowledge Arnie Barb for her welcome, but also the Kids Uni, sort of a stark reminder of why we do this sort of work. It's for them. It's the future of the nation. That's why we're here. So thank you.
Morning, everybody. I'm Jackie Adams. I work for the Fred Hollows Foundation. We've been on Darrell country for the last 3 days, so I acknowledge the traditional custodians and for them protecting us and giving us this amazing weather while we've been here. It's such a beautiful place to be in. I was very fortunate to be a part of the Uluru Convention in 2017, and what continues to drive me as a proud Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman is that we still don't have our human rights in this country, and I will always fight for that. As Jeff said, we do this for our ancestors, we do it for ourselves, we do it for our future generations, and I want a world that is an Australia that is more encompassing than it is now for my children and their children's children. And I just want to acknowledge our staunch warriors who've left us, since 2017. And we definitely do this for them. They're not forgotten, they're always here. And I will do what I can to support their legacy.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So perhaps let's dive straight into the role of allyship in advancing the goals of the Uluru Statement, being voice, treaty, truth. Rather than throwing anyone under the bus, maybe I'll just open up to the entire panel. I'm sure everyone here has got amazing things to share on their views of allyship and the role that wider Australia can play.
Yes, I'm very fortunate to work for the Fred Hollows Foundation, a global entity, but who practice allyship on a daily basis. My role as Director of Social Justice is around health equity and self-determination for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I've been with the Foundation for about 12 years, and my role in that space, the non-Indigenous space, is to always ensure that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices are heard and that we are hopefully listened to, not just heard, but listened to. So last year, we established the Allies for Uluru Coalition with ANTA, Oxfam and ACOS as the founding members with us. That has grown to some 300 odd organisations, and we couldn't have got the support of the wider Australian public, I think, without the mobilisation of groups like Allies for Uluru and all the many allies groups that were established to support. My ask for allies is always about accountability. You can't just support us by wearing a shirt. There has to be actions attached to your support.
I think too that action connected to the support is vital. I've seen through the campaign and then after the referendum, people that would maybe call themselves allies retreat and step back, and maybe that's a response to the feelings you have and the sadness you have too. But we do need people to step up and walk with us and to stay true to Uluru and to be along the journey, but to facilitate ways that voices can be heard, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices can be heard, to navigate people into positions to mobilise when we need people to support people to be mobilised, to facilitate things happening, to talk to your families, to continue to talk to the sports clubs you're with, and all the community groups you're connected to keep making a change and to keep believing in what the vision is for a better Australia.
Yeah, I think it's important for our allies to stand firm and proud of what we achieved last year as well. Auntie Pat was right. 6.2 million Australians is a substantial chunk of this country. You know, almost 50%, right? 40% of Australians voted yes, and that is huge. When we think about us being only 4% of the population, and now we can confidently, with certainty know that at least 40% are walking with us towards justice and recognition, and we just need to grow from that. And this summit is so important to dusting ourselves off and going forward. I think those that disinformed and fear-mongered last year would want us to believe that last year was a failure, but it was not a failure. That's what they want us to think. They want us to not stand up and keep fighting. They want us to give up. They want to take us backwards. And so we can never believe that we failed any more than we failed when we made those early petitions, such as the Day of Mourning, calling for equal citizenship rights and all those things that we achieved in '67. We're always told no first. When we called for equal wages, when the Gurinji mob walked off, we were told no first. No last year does not mean we are not going to achieve what we tried to achieve. So that's the first job, is to get out there, to tell your history as well. Record your history, speak it, learn it, teach it. And we write history about the positives of what last year was about to help the next generation achieve it.
Yes, well, for allyship, it's very important, I think. And, one thing that sort of I was focused on during the referendum campaign was we didn't have a formal focused group for the 97% of Australians to feed their input through. Allies stepped up in that regard and established themselves, and it came from the people. Because we look at it, the invitation from the Uluru Statement. The Uluru Statement was an invitation to all Australians. The allies, which representing civil society organisations and groups around the country, stood up at that time, and they remain. I think that's a real message for us going forward. There's 6 million people there. Like I said, 9 million remain to have their education improved. But again, it's sitting down and working out what were the messages that we heard there. And it's the role of the allyships, the allies in that. I think we're still a civically illiterate country. Most people don't know we've got a constitution still. They didn't even read it during the issue. Well, many politicians don't read it. But it's about putting those in place about what makes us a better nation. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be here after this. And it's important to the allies, I think, in this process, they've recognised the role that allyship plays in this, the 97%, and stepping up and filling those roles. And when we think we've sold the message, we start again. That's how we change the nation itself. We misread how resistant Australia was to change, how powerful the existing structures were that didn't want any change. I haven't seen one no campaigner at the moment come up with any solutions. So it remains up to, I think, ourselves and the allies to provide that. So that's the role for us going forward. Thank you.
Great, thanks all. Maybe staying on the subject of allyship, has anyone got any deadly examples of genuine allyship that's been effective? It'd be amazing if it was at like a local kind of community level, but any things I know allies, a question I certainly often receive is like, righto, well, how do you be an ally? What can I do? There's a lot of genuine good faith and an intent to want to do good. Perhaps like it'd be great to hear a few examples of what's been working on the ground.
I'll go first. I think, the inspirational kids, I think that's such an important area of allyship, is to continue to teach our kids. I want to thank all the educators that are online and here and all of the parents that are here that are doing great work helping the next generation understand. And I think that work is, the example can be seen practically in the results of how young people voted yes in the referendum. You know, Generation Z, I think they call it, overwhelmingly yes. So we know that First Nations people voted yes, so we're on the right side of history. We know that young people voted yes, so that the work that is happening in schools and at home is really effective.
And just building on that, what Thomas spoke about young people, it's facilitating opportunities for young people. So young people to be able to get to forums. If that means sponsorships, that means sponsorships. If that means raising funds for scholarships, it means raising money for scholarships. It means we have to train up those future generations, those young people coming through, to step up when that time's right, along with the people that are there now, along the path, moving along further to further the agenda. And keeping the vision alive, keeping the thinking alive around that Australia can be better, that we do need systems change, we need structural change in this country. So how do you do that in terms of the mechanisms that you have influence over and influence with? How do you navigate that? To have forums, to have discussion circles in all the groups that you're part of, in the circles of influence that you're part of.
Oh, I think so. But there's many, I think, groups that are established themselves now. Not just the Allies group here. There's a Shoalhaven group here where the representatives are here. They've established themselves. There's the groups in Western Sydney have built up, in North Sydney. So there are groups around who are just established themselves to take this work forward. And it's not just, it's about the education of the nation to one extent, but I think what's happened with the Close the Gap report. What happened with the Close the Gap reports that came back in the last few months? Underline what we're talking about. The report came back and told us that the government's still not listening. They're paying lip service. The bureaucrats did not hear. The ministers did not hear. They may have listened, but they didn't hear. And that's part of the work we have to do. That's also, I think, bringing our nation to a point where we take a greater interest in what's going on in our society. And that's the role, I think, of the Allies going forward. And having this group actually formalise themselves and really showing that this will continue, and the process is just commenced. It hasn't finished. It'll go on until we get a result which is a better one for the whole nation itself. So there's a whole body of work to be focused on those issues. But our groups are creating themselves, are getting in place, and are getting organised. And that's the response I think we should take heart in.
Yeah, Allies for Uluru Coalition, obviously, is an awesome example, but the 300 organisations that walk with that coalition, and the amazing Holly Edwards, who's already been mentioned this morning, is our gold medal ally person who's just doing amazing stuff. And again, it's the youth, you know, it's the middle-aged people like me, and it's our elders that are all coming together to make a difference. I would just say that allyship going forward, we need to appreciate the Uluru Statement from the heart is from the heart, but it calls for voice, treaty, truth. So as we've been saying a few times today, it's not over. Even though our voice is not recognised in the Constitution, we still have a voice, and we still need it to be heard, and we need our allies to support us in that.
Great. So maybe picking up on that theme, what do the panelists, and this is for anyone that wants to answer, see as some of the greatest challenges facing the movement for the Uluru Statement from the Heart moving forward, given that really important point, which unfortunately has been extremely conflated, that Auntie Pat spoke to as well. The referendum was the referendum for a constitutionally enshrined voice. It was not the entirety of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, which is very much alive and well and is an important part of moving the country forward, not just our First Nations communities, but the entire nation, which is my understanding, it's a movement of the people for a better future for Australia. So right now, what do you see as some of those major challenges for moving us forward on voice, treaty, truth?
Well, I think one of the greatest challenges is how progressive politicians are intimidated by the result, and as we saw at Gama, seem to be walking away from commitments that were made, Albo, at the last election. That's a great challenge, and I think there is an assessment that they've made that is wrong. That somehow, because most Australians voted no, that most Australians don't want progress and don't want change for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I don't believe that many of the no voters voted no too on that basis. I think they were confused. I think they fell for the fear-mongering, and it was the disgraceful choice that Peter Dutton made to use it as a political opportunity. So a great challenge is that politics. Progressives walking away, intimidated by the likes of Peter Dutton, and we need to build a people's movement. We need to build this allyship, dust ourselves off and be louder and prouder than ever, to cause them to show some leadership and to take on the lies that the coalition peddled last year. And finally, if they should succeed at the next election, we're going to see the darkest times that we have seen for a long time. And we must see that there is political repercussions for such choices, such disgraceful choices. And I think that's incumbent on all of us to talk about politics at home and in our communities, to help them to understand why it's an important decision to make next election, that they should not be rewarded for what they did.
I think I'd like to follow up on Thomas. Working? I think I'd like to follow up on Thomas's comments, just to re-emphasise that. I think hindsight's a wonderful thing, but if you look back at what happened during the whole campaign, I think the Prime Minister announcing he was going to support the Uluru Statement and go to a referendum on election night. At that second, I'm sure that the Dutton, and what's the other thing's name? Little Proud, he came back and actually made that a target for the government. Didn't matter what the impact was on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It became a political ploy, and it became a play toy of the political parties. And I'm saying that I think this is too important to be left to politicians. And to some extent it's too important to be left to the media, because all they do is play games with politicians and with our heads. I think a people's movement is one where we start getting out, informing ourselves, beyond those two aspects of our society, which, I'll be honest, I think have failed us miserably. And it's a people's movement, same way we do that, more people being engaged in civil society, more people being engaged in politics, holding our politicians to account, holding the media to account. There were no campaigners to be out there and they'll go with their mean-spirited little voices and what they're doing, attacking their issues, but they'll remain. But I think the greater bulk of Australians are still decent people who want the best thing for the nation. So a movement of the people is what the Uluru Statement called for, and that's what we're still pursuing. We still need a say in matters that affect us. That means we need a voice. We still need the truth to be told. We need truth-telling. And we still need agreements on the way forward, a treaty. None of that has been diminished or has gone away. It remains still the mandate and the issue from the Uluru Statement. And that should be at the back of the forefront of our minds when we're proceeding forward. And I think that's been demonstrated by the allyship. So thank you.
Yeah, and I guess a challenge for allies in regards to the people's movement is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are really hurting. I know you are too, and you're with us, but we need you to step up. When we're not in the room, have those conversations that need to be had. Call out racism, call out all the disinformation. Step up for us. We're hurting, we're tired. We're kind of a bit confused as to what this nation is, our nation, what it's become, how we make it better for our children.
Totally agree with what Jackie just said about calling it out. I urge all allies, and people are on the border of saying whether they're an ally or not, if you're coming across to be an ally, stay true to Uluru. Things will get tough as we move to both state and federal and territory elections. I know in Queensland we've got talks around treaty as well that's happening in other jurisdictions. We saw lots of misinformation, disinformation, lies and gossip during the campaign for the referendum, which some were propagated by the media itself. So the media is not, you cannot read everything and trust everything that you read. We know that politicians will play off, and Thomas has spoken about some of that. We know that despite agreement on referendum night, despite 7 formal processes and 10 formal reports that were all approved and supported and paid for by the LNP, they backflipped. So we know policies come and go, politicians come and go. We are all still here. The public is still here. We need the people's movement. We need people to stay true to Uluru and stay on the path, you know. Be guided by Aboriginal people, be guided by Torres Strait people, be guided by those sites, the Uluru Statement site, the Allies for Uluru site, other sites that have reliable, factual information that you can trust, okay? Stay true to Uluru.
Excellent. I might pick up on the theme, certainly staying true to Uluru, but also a bit of a spotlight there a few times on youth. And I'd be, whilst I don't fit in that demographic any longer, I would be curious to hear from yourselves what can be done to ensure there's continued inspiration and that, you know, keep the fire burning, the theme for NAIDOC Week, particularly for our young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders, where, as you mentioned, just then, that the, you know, policies, they come and go, laws come and go, politicians come and go, the people, we remain, and we always will. We have for over 65,000 years. We're strong, resilient, proud, deadly black people, but our young ones, they're going to be picking up the mantle soon enough. So what's the message? What can we do to prepare them for the next time? There's a key moment in Australia's history, like 14th of October last year.
Well, I think we've got members of the Uluru Youth here. The Uluru Dialogues have continued that work in terms of training and working with young people coming up and young leaders. I know I work in a university, and I know young people are, you know, questioning what has happened still. They are keen for a change in Australia. They're campaigning on a range of issues. Every single week, every single day, things come before them. But I know in terms of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander young people, they want a different life than their parents have. They want things to change. I do think there is a need for civics education, basic civics. A lot of the misinformation was spread and developed because people don't know the difference in terms of state, federal. We see that coming up now with treaties. Well, we voted no to referendum. We voted no to that. Only Pat spoke about that, but not understanding that they only voted no around the Constitution. They didn't vote no to treaty, and they didn't vote no to truth. They didn't vote around state and territories moving ahead with treaties. There's lots of confusion around that. So how do we push politicians and push governments to say we need civics in some way, that we either do it ourselves in the community or we push it into that education space, that it needs to be introduced in a greater way in schooling?
Yeah, I think civics and critical thinking is something we need to be teaching as well to the younger folk and our friends and family. Critical thinking is important to help people disseminate what is truth and what's fiction in the waves of the masses of information that people are receiving. I think to answer your question though, just one suggestion is there should be another summit. And I know that the Uluru youth, Bridget, the great work that you do, it'd be great to see some of the young people that stepped up into leadership up on the stage at the next summit, and us giving them that platform.
I think that's a deadly idea.
I don't want to re-emphasise it again, but everyone's now mentioned the issue about civics. When this whole campaign started out, the referendum, we were supposed to spend a good deal of resources on educating the nation about civics, about the Constitution itself, where it went to. I think there was $7 or $8 million allocated. Never saw it. Never saw it hit the ground. That enables misinformation when there's no facts on the table. Naval Dutton last week to criticise the fact that it cost $460 million for a referendum. That wasn't Albanese's fault. If you want to blame someone, blame the framers of the Constitution. They set the process up, but that wasn't explained to anyone. That's a different process for each of the state constitutions. Now, people don't get their head into that sort of thing. I'm a nerd, so I like that sort of stuff.
I'll just add one more thing for that. I think we should continue to push for a Makarrata Commission and, hold the government to account for their commitments, because that would be a great platform for our youth as well. One great thing about the referendum last year was it really developed some great young leaders, I think, all around the country. I saw Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth stepping up, especially towards, October the 14th. And it really gave them some great experience and some great networks. And I think it gave them more confidence than they lost by the result, because I think they'll continue to fight. That is our youth, because they're willing to keep fighting. And a Makarrata Commission would be great for the next generations.
I'll just continue what I was saying then. But the point on this one is, that's why I want to focus. Our demographic is saying the youth are very much the demographic that supported change. They're the ones who are going to be open for being informed, understanding what's going on. And the youth movement, and again, so Bridget's here, maybe she should have been up here as well. But that's really where I think we have to focus and be pragmatic about it. There are some people whose minds won't be changed. Focus where it is. We have to be fairly rigorous and focused on how we go about this. It's about changing how the nation thinks and works. Because it's not actually giving us a very good outcome at the moment in terms of the current political structures. Let's hope the deck chairs will change.
I think it's the other factor, youth and being the beneficiaries, but also the, subject to the consequences of our decisions today is a big thing. Certainly everything I bring forward in all of my daily life it's a legacy piece. I'm sure everyone here on the stage is the same. My thoughts are always with my ancestors, with my jargons, with future generations and with myself in a future life when I come back and do it all again. It's really important that sense of connection to all things around us, and that sense of legacy and responsibility to country, which is all of us. That's my belief now.
I just want to add something here around that legacy stuff for the young people. And I want to talk a little bit about what happened yesterday when I went back to my hotel. Yesterday, I had a sweater on that was covered in pink hearts. And I had pink sparkly heart earrings and a pink sparkly necklace with a heart, just like I've got hearts on today. And some young girls who were 13 and 12 and 11, I asked their ages, asked me about the hearts. And I talked to them about Uluru Statement from the heart. They clicked straight away about the voice. They weren't of voting age. They will be one day. But they clicked straight into it. And they clicked into, said, yes, the hearts, the Uluru, the voice. If we could vote, we'd vote, one of them said. We'd vote yes. They gave me hope last night. They gave me hope, even when I had a big day, full day with Fred Hollow's Foundation. But I had a beautiful ending to my day with those young women, young girls, in the foyer of the hotel. So that is everywhere. Young people see, witness, have been through this process with us. I wear hearts every day because it helps me have conversations like that. The heart earrings I've got on today were a gift from someone in Wollongong, Patricia Davidson, who used to be the VC of this university. Many of the things I wear with hearts on are gifted to me. And I'll just conclude one of the stories. One of the beautiful things I received during the campaign was hearts drawn in a picture from 4 and 5-year-olds. And people might say, oh, they're full of propaganda. But what they spoke of when I saw them later was also of the hearts in Uluru. They knew about it. They weren't just drawing it, they knew about it. So that inspires me. And I know young people are the future. I see them in my work. I hear them. I watch them. They demonstrate through their actions that they want a better world than we're leaving them. And for that, I feel very confident that they will step up. They're there, they're ready, they want to.
Yeah, how good's that? So picking up on that theme of hope, actually had the benefit of recently listening to Mr. Thomas Mayo talk about an upcoming book of his, and in particular, the importance of hope for the nation in moving us forward beyond, as Jackie referenced before, some continuingly challenging times for a lot of us. I'd like to maybe give you an opportunity to speak to that as well. Again, the importance of hope in certainly current society for all of us.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Late last year, sort of reflecting on all the work that we'd all done, and obviously hearing many questions from lots of our allies and friends. What do we do next? I thought I needed to write something, given I'd done that book with Kerry O'Brien in the lead up to the referendum. So I just got the first copies the other day, actually. Always was, always will be, a defiant title. The campaign for justice and recognition continues, and the first part is about hope. The first chapter is hope, and what about the Uluru Statement now? The second part is 4 chapters on history, just taking those lessons and looking forward. And then the final part is what's next. So, Jackie helped me out with it, and Holly, and quite a few others, and I hope it's going to help.
We have to have hope. An elder who's passed said to me, "What's the alternative?" So if you don't have, we have to have hope that the future will be different, will be better, will be able to exercise our rights for my children and their children's children. Hope is what keeps me going. It's what drives me. And in terms of the youth, I'm surrounded by some amazing, inspirationally brilliant youth every single day. They give me hope that what we are doing now won't be forgotten and isn't unnecessary, and that they will help carry the baton forward, and that they are teaching their children and those that they come into contact with the importance of this movement, the importance of human rights, the importance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people being heard. So if you don't have hope, I encourage you to find it, and happy to have a conversation around what hope looks like or could mean in your context.
I think the point of hope is that one point we started out with the Uluru Statement was it was a dream for a better future. It's about hoping for a better future. And that was at its core. And again, where we are today, I think it's by chance that we're meeting in a university, a place of learning, a place where people have a safe space to come and debate issues and learn from each other. So I think that's what the process where there's a hope for a better future, and that's the Uluru Statement itself.
All right, well, let's talk about that better future. What do we see as the path forward to move us towards? You use the term, often it comes up in my work, shared history and truth-telling. It's about understanding a lot of the historical realities of our people and of our nation. But I continually reflect on this, not just about the negative and the harsh realities, about the beautiful aspects of truth-telling about our culture, our people and our communities, and the beautiful future, the vision we have for all Australians. I'm curious what we see to be, and I know we've touched on it in brief, but what is next? How do we move things forward towards that better future?
Well, I think firstly, just to reiterate, we need to continue to push for truth-telling in this country, the Makarrata Commission. But I think, like when I was writing the final chapter of this, I was trying to work out, what is next? How do we put this to people? And when I was thinking it through, yes, we need people power, and we've covered that. We need organisations acting, and we see that in this summit, and we saw a lot of it through the referendum campaign. A lot of organisations got behind us. We need good government policies, self-determination, policies that do give communities voice, regardless of the outcome last year, that see good decisions made on the basis of listening to those that are most affected. But what has been missing from all of that is consistency. From time to time, we have people power. From time to time, we get some good policies. And from time to time, we get organisations acting, but what has always been missing is consistency. And I think, therefore, the other thing that we need to vigorously fight for is partisanship on a pathway to justice and recognition. We've got to get back bipartisanship. We've got to hold to account those that walked away from it last year. But we really need to fight for those politicians to do better and to maintain the struggle despite the low points that we will experience from time to time.
I think adding to what Thomas has said, people need to continue to also educate themselves. People will spend time Googling TripAdvisor and where to eat when they go somewhere on holidays and what kind of car you're going to buy and, you know, all these kind of things, where to get a painter, all of those sort of things, but not chase up information and chase up facts and materials about what is in your local area around Aboriginal people, Torres Strait Islander people. For here, it's Aboriginal organisations. Look at how you can help locally. What type of things can you counter that helps with policy and those bigger issues? What are your local politicians doing? They're all connected, part of the state, but they're also connected federally. And how can you influence at your local level? So one thing is the national work, and the other part is the regional and local work, and being consistent in all of that. Holding the faith, staying true to Uluru, keep on that path. Okay, we're all I know, and I get tired sometimes, we all do, but you can have a consistency of your approach and consistency in what you do over time. Yeah.
We just had a 2-day workshop for the Fred Hollows Foundation with our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cohort, just looking at what allyship looks like in the foundation and how do we define it from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspective. And my key takeaway from that was truth-telling is important, not only individually, but as organisations. So going forward, I would ask that we self-reflect. Are my actions enough? Am I doing any actions? What is the history of my organisation and how do we move forward to being a better ally, improving our processes and our systems for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples? We live in a very colonised world and our systems are very colonised, even though we want to change them. We know they need to change. So how do we do that? How do we collectively make the changes in our spaces of influence to then inform the future of this country? So that self-reflection and that truth-telling, I think, is where we need to go forward. Whilst the bigger movements are happening, that's what we can do individually.
Just one point I'd like to make about allyship, and it's both the organisation and individual. We have a political system which was founded on the basis that a local member was supposed to represent the interests of its constituents. They don't. They represent the interests of their party. We had a constitution founded on the basis that their senators are supposed to represent the interests of the state. They do not. They represent the interests of their party. I think that is, as allies, as institutions, as individuals, reminding your local members, your senators, the people who make these decisions, who are supposed to be our leaders, of what their real roles are. It's got to be part of our ethos going forward, and to bring them back to focus on the needs of people, especially the most vulnerable people.
Okay, as we edge towards the finish line, I'm going to cut each of you a blank check. On that check, you can decide one thing that you would have allies do in Australia to support the continuing movement of the Uluru Statement, or we'll flip the coin. It could be one thing you do not want an ally to do. I'll give you a moment to think about it because you weren't perhaps aware that I was going to ask this question.
Okay, I'll have a go first then while everyone's thinking. One thing that I don't think works and I don't want allies to do is to attack people that, you know, are not quite there yet. I think the best things, the best way to move people is to especially now that we haven't got like a deadline sort of October 14 thing coming up, you know. Continue to campaign like we're in that campaign, but you can take your time with your friends and family. I want you to not attack them, to give them some information, respond to their misconceptions and concerns, and follow up.
Well, I think my real message back to the point is to don't lose hope. It's about a dream for a better future. You can never lose hope for that. And the only people who can do that are people. And the allies for Uluru represent that very ideal. So just don't lose hope and keep dreaming for a better future. It is possible. That's how most change happens. Most people don't think it can happen, but if you dream about it, you can make it work.
I guess my response is that money's not the issue. So a blank check is about money. And I guess to me, that's not the issue. It's not about money. It's about hearts, souls and minds changing. And I guess it's just about ensuring that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's voices are heard in your areas of influence. So if it means the sponsorship, if it means stepping aside and letting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have a say, if it means talking up and speaking, you know, with authority on what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in your area of influence is asking for and needing from you in terms of having the voice, because our voice is not being heard in many instances. So yeah, it's just about that hope, stepping up and being an ally in whichever capacity you can be.
I think it is about staying true to Uluru, staying true to the message and not getting sidetracked by the curveballs and things that come from the side that try to deflect and distract you and me and us off the path going forward. And the other part of that is signing up to those websites if you don't already and not registered with Uluru Statement, Uluru Dialogue site, that you get on that. You get on the Allies for Uluru site and other aligned sites to get information when you need to. Get your circle going of people you can ask of, you know, what can you respond to certain things, and then following on from what Jackie said of how you navigate to ensure Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices are being heard, where people can be given positions in ways at forums to be able to speak. Question when there are no Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people presented. Stand up in those circles and speak when we are not in the room. You know, often we're the only ones in the room and sometimes we have to talk, but we shouldn't have to always be there to talk. You need to step up in those forums and say, where are the voices? You know? So make yourself a vehicle, make yourself an action. And going right back to something one of the panelists said way back in the beginning, one of the first questions from the respondents was, allyship does require more than wearing the shirt. It requires action. Be and do the action and stay true to Uluru. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I only just recently myself was reading something on what it means to be a genuine ally, and something that struck me was it goes to the point of a big part of it is ensuring the amplification of First Nations leadership and views, and ensuring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are heard. Often that will, and makes sense, manifest as, oh, I need to speak for and with and you know, contribute to the conversation. But this article was reflecting on equally there needs to be a preparedness to actually not speak, to know when to step up and speak, but equally to know when to, you know, stay quiet and support in different ways. I think that's a really strong thing as well, because particularly people with great intentions, imagine, have this real desire to want to get in and actively engage. Sometimes the silent support behind the scenes can be the strongest mechanism, is what this article is speaking to. Anywho, perhaps I might throw over for final comments from everyone. We're about to wind up, so to give each of you, and I won't give any frame to this question, just whatever you'd like to speak to close out this deadly yarn.
I'll just go quickly. Annie, Pat, Bridget, Thomas, thank you. and everyone that was involved in getting to the referendum. We thank you all and we appreciate everything that you do. Sorry, I get a bit emotional. Today is International Allyship Day. Tomorrow is International Day of World Indigenous Peoples. So we have all these days that we can use as mechanisms to get our voices out there as well. And I encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Is mine? Yeah, it's live now. Just when I came into the auditorium, someone gave me a hug and said, I missed you. I've missed you. We learned we had 6.2 million friends who voted yes. Don't be strangers. Be our friends, the friends we know we have. We are your friends, you are our friends. Be those friends. Miss us in the same way some of us may miss you. And don't be strangers. Be allies, be our friends. Be there, bring other people into your circle, your other friends, to add to the numbers that we have going forward. Thank you.
I'd like to do a bit of an anecdote, if you want. I work for Justice Reinvestment these days. I'm CEO of Justice Reinvestment New South Wales, which, if you like, it's a bit of a paradigm program. We're trying to actually go back and look at what the causes of the issues of people getting incarcerated are, not the symptoms. No, we have symptoms down the end. We try and catch people when they're coming out of jail. What we should be doing is stopping people going into incarceration. That's what the program's about. Now, when you put this program in place, we're doing it in 6 or 7 locations in New South Wales. What's the first thing the government wants? It's got to be community-led. What does that mean? Oh, we're going to have a leadership group. What does that mean? Oh, we need a voice. Oh, really? So in all those locations now, we're establishing a voice. We're doing it ad hocly, anecdotally, but we're still doing it. And all I'm saying is, look at the little things that are happening, because they're all part of the big picture. And you understand what we mean by a voice. We had the voice established in each one of those communities, we wouldn't need to do this. There'd be a strong process where they'd be giving advice on what the priorities are. They're giving advice on what the local community sees as needs, not what government sees. Those sort of examples are happening all the time. Use those as the ammunition of what we mean by practically what a voice means. The truth is what the community tells you happens. We get an agreement to go forward. Those little things are happening now, so don't lose heart on those. We're still working on them, but it's about getting government to come to the table as well. And there are many friends out there who are trying to help us do this. And one point that I gathered from all those communities you went to, the non-Aboriginal community who's involved in that are now wanting their voice. And that's why some people are tweaking that what we're asking for is what everyone's trying to get, a voice. A real saying what's affecting their lives. The same matters that affect them, tell the truth and have an agreement. If you go back to it, that's what the Uluru Statement asked for. So the little things matter. I'm trying to make that, you might just watch what's around you and be aware of them. It helps us, going forward, so thank you.
Yeah, I just want to finish by firstly talking about the familiarity, and it's already been somewhat mentioned, but don't underestimate the importance of introducing people to our culture and the truth of our history. I think many people did not support the referendum last year because they didn't really know us. And when we're told, when we hear a rumour about a stranger, it's easier to believe than it is when we hear a rumour about a friend. So it is something that individuals and organisations can do, something very practical, is to introduce people to our music, to our culture, anything like that. Anything you can do. Arnie Barb's great work about introducing people to, the reality of why we end up in incarceration and the love that our people have. All of those types of things are really important. So I think also that's something that we can do. But also I think it's important that we record our history. I mentioned that earlier. So we should record history about what happened, not those that opposed us. And don't underestimate the importance of your own story because I know there are a lot of people that had never been involved in a political campaign in their life or had looked forward to an opportunity like we had last year, that put their hearts and souls into trying to realise the vision of the Uluru Statement last year. And I want you to write about those experiences, not just the positive experiences that you had, but also the negative experiences that you had, the racism that you felt. Record it, even if you think nobody will ever read it. Just write down that history, publish it if you have an opportunity, share it with your children and your grandchildren, and we push that tide of the truth of what happened last year forward towards achieving our goals. Finally, I just wanted to thank everybody, so much inspiration from our allies and my brothers and sisters that walked with me, Bronwyn, Bridget, Auntie Pat, Jeff and Jackie and everyone. Daniel, running around the country with Pat Farmer from time to time. Tanya Hosh, the day after her leg, an amputation, standing up and announcing the date of the referendum with Albo. Just Michael Long and just so many inspirational moments. The union movement here, Arthur Roris, getting behind it. So much to be proud of, and so much thanks and love for you all.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. So probably close by pointing out, I don't believe it's been said, so the Uluru Statement from the Heart, it's really important to understand. It is the single greatest consensus from First Nations peoples for a substantive proposal for change in Australia's history. That should be given quite a bit of weight in terms of speaking a voice and representative voice and a way forward for our nation. So for me, it's been a real honour hearing the powerful, insightful words from all of yourselves and sharing this stage. Certainly filled my cup, and I look forward to continuing to work alongside yourselves and everybody that's joined us today in moving Australia towards that better future that we all want for ourselves and for future generations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much to Blake and our fabulous panellists. A really thought-provoking session. A few very quick takeouts for all of us, I think. Staying the course. This is really just the beginning or a new start. And hope. And hope. I think Jackie said, hope's what keeps her going. And if nothing else comes out of today, and a lot is coming out of today, there is hope. And that's something we can all grab a hold of and take out there together. We'll now take a short break for morning tea. Our thanks to Auntie Donna Dunning for providing some delicious sweet treats for us this morning. At the rear of the room on the right, say hi to Auntie Donna. Tea, coffee and cool drinks are at the rear of the room to the left. These fabulous T-shirts available. There are better models than me in the room. Daniel Burke is one. They're available for purchase at the rear of the room, and any profits will go to support Indigenous students here at UOW. Thanks to Wiradjuri and Ngunnawal woman Brittany Angus for your striking design. Are you with us today, Britt? She's online. Okay. Congratulations to you, Britt. Everyone, grab a T-shirt. They're exclusively on sale here today. And please rejoin us when we resume the summit at 11:20. And don't forget to sign the guest book, everyone, online and here through the QR code. See you very soon. Okay, thanks very much, delegates. We'll make a start on our next session. As the lights dim. Well, welcome back. And we now have our second panel discussion. Could I invite our next group of panellists to the stage? And this panel will discuss how we embrace allyship in practice. Please welcome human rights activist Craig Foster, UOW's Conscious Community Lead, Catherine Moyle, South Coast Labor Council leader Arthur Rorris, the CEO of Oxfam, Lynn Morgaine, the acting CEO of ACOS, Edwina McDonald, and Chief Operating Officer from Waminda, Faye Warner. Please come to the stage. And our facilitator for this session is Peter Lewis. Peter is the National President for ANTAR, with more than 25 years as a researcher and advocate in First Nations affairs.
That's an old bio, it's 27.
27 years, closing in on 28, no doubt. Welcome, Peter, and over to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Just let people get settled, and your bottles of water on the right, so don't take someone else's bottle of water. So yeah, I think this session we're going to primarily look at allyship in practice from an ally's perspective. So we've got various people here who will talk about what their personal experiences, but experience. Hello? Right, so this session is about allyship in practice. And so the panel is primarily non-Indigenous people who are allies. We've also got Catherine as I guess, to keep us honest in our questions. So the first thing I want to do is ask the panelists about their experience around the supporting the Uluru Statement from their heart, describing their involvement, and perhaps give us one example of a personal story around their allyship. Right, we'll see if this works. Did you guys hear my question? Yeah, basically your involvement in promoting the Uluru Statement from the heart from an organisational perspective, but also some personal experience that sort of drew you in to allyship. And I'll go down the line. So first to you, Craig.
All right, so yeah, thank you. Lovely to be here. Thanks for the invitation with the esteemed panel. And you know, my involvement was just by invitation of various organisations that were as part of The Voice, and through sitting with you know, a number of politicians around the place who are putting on their own kind of forums, many like this, and trying to talk through the various issues. That's all. Taking time to try and be as educated as possible on it, and try to use the what we would say the platform or the profile or the social capital that I had or have to try and lend that to that particular issue, and therefore to bring along the cohorts that I might be able to influence.
I get to share with Craig. That's very exciting. I'm going to boast about that when I go home.
And also, sorry, and also tell us who you are.
Yeah, I'll do that as well. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name's Catherine Moyle. I'm a Gamilaroi woman. I'm proud, hurt, healing, hopeful, and I like alliteration. My role here at the university, really, and sort of in community, I would say that myself and my team, we're like allies for allies, which would make some of you allies for allies for allies, and it all gets very complicated. But our role here really is around strengthening the capacity and the confidence of our allyship locally, and just really in terms of helping to guide individuals in the different opportunities and the different ways that they can have impact. I was also involved in the Yes campaign, so I'd sort of come in and out of those spaces as I had the energy and the, just the ability to. Yes, yeah. What do you, Arthur?
Right, you can hear that, I take it, it's working. My name's Arthur Rorris, and as the intro said, I'm the Secretary of the South Coast Labor Council, which is the peak union body in the region. It was a very, well, it was, in some ways, it was a very good opportunity to touch base for many of our affiliates, and I acknowledge many of the people in the room who spent a lot of time and effort preparing and executing, I guess, the work on the ground. But we treated it as an organising approach. That's what we do. We're there to organise working people, to advance the interests of working people. And we've got principles that are very very deep-seated and have been put to great effect for decades, for over 100 years. And they all revolve around not leaving anyone behind. They revolve around working collectively for a common good. And they also involve sticking up for each other, because we know that being part of the working class means that we've had a long, long history of those with power and privilege trying to stop us improving our lot and stop us actually getting a proper voice. So it was a natural fit. So in this region in particular, it was a privilege to be part of the campaign, and it was also good to see that apart from the ones that were already on side, being a union town in particular and the highest percentage of union membership in the country, it gave us an opportunity to have conversations, because you never take for granted what people are really thinking, what they're saying, what they're not saying, what they've been told, and the misinformation they've been spun. So even though the result was, I think, quite tragic on many levels, it also shows us the way forward, and it's been a privilege to be part of it. The other thing is that we've got a long history of work with our First Nations people in this region, and I'm very proud to be part of an organisation that has worked with our brothers and sisters in the Aboriginal community in setting up the Aboriginal Advancement League in 1961. It's been a partnership of more than 60 years, and I'm sure it'll be decades to come, and this is just one chapter of it.
Hi everyone, my name's Faye Warner. So I work at Woolyungah, South Coast Women's Health and Wellbeing Aboriginal Corporation. So we're based primarily down in the Shoalhaven, but we've spread along the south coast of New South Wales. So Woolyungah is an Aboriginal community controlled health organisation, and this is our 40th year of leadership actually in the community. So we've got a pretty big footprint right up and down the coast. So I guess our role in terms of coming on the back end of the Uluru Statement from the Heart and into the Yes campaign and around the referendum was really significant. So I guess I follow on from what Arthur was saying in terms of that organisation. It's core business at Woolyungah in terms of, you know, fighting for Aboriginal rights and that justice perspective and social justice perspective and upholding Aboriginal ways of knowing, being and doing. So there was nothing more important to us at the time than the fight. So we very much had a really big role, and myself as an imperfect ally, there's a particular role that we have in Woolyungah when we are not Aboriginal people to take up the fight even harder from behind and beside our Aboriginal colleagues to, you know, ensure that every step of the way that we're doing what we need to do and that we're highlighting and elevating that work, you know, understanding that, you know, 97% of the population are not Aboriginal. So it's actually, you know, firmly and squarely that role has to be us leading some of that work in terms of listening and knowing the right direction. So we were incredibly active at that time and remain so. So it hasn't stopped for us and it won't. And I suppose, you know, my role at Woolyungah is very much about guiding and supporting our imperfect allies at Woolyungah and the work we have to do. It's actually mandatory participation at Woolyungah to be, you know, in terms of participating in imperfect allyship training, you know, think tanks, reflection activities, and the role extends far beyond the workplace. So, you know, working at Woolyungah is a 24/7 gig. So you have to not just turn up and be an ally when you feel like it. So our efforts are into what that looks like in community. And, you know, we're really proud to walk alongside organisations now like Shoalhaven Walking Together Alliance down on the Shoalhaven, which has been a group of people who were involved in the Yes campaign, you know, mostly allies, and who have now gathered and created an organisation to continue to do the work that's required. So Woolyungah is very, I guess, pleased to be walking alongside those sorts of organisations and people, and we see that as core business. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Edwina McDonald. I'm the acting CEO of ACOS, the Australian Council of Social Service. We're the peak body for community services, sector in Australia. And when the Uluru Statement of the Heart was first gifted to us as a nation, ACOS was one of the early supporters who came out publicly in support of the statement, and we did so by organising a public statement which 10,000 people signed on to. And we continue to support the statement, including by, I think as Jackie mentioned this morning, along with Oxfam and Fred Hollows, founding the Allies for Uluru. And for us as ACOS, we really focus through the referendum campaign on what's the role of the community services sector in this, what's our role as organisations and also as employees, and how do we support employees and the organisations in our sector to campaign for the voice, for treaty, for truth. Post-referendum, one of the things that we did was issue a statement of solidarity, which was a recommitment to voice, treaty, treaty truth, and also to self-determination and First Nations justice. And 80 community organisations have signed on to that. It's still something that organisations can sign up to if it's something you're interested in. And internally what we've done then is gone through a process of looking at the commitments that are made in that statement and looking at how do we implement them in our own organisation, which I can talk to probably a little bit later, so I won't go into that now. But on a personal level, which I think you were keen for us to go to as well, I was really struck this morning with Auntie Pat and her discussion of the gift that the Uluru Statement of the Heart is, and the generosity with which it was brought forth. And that's been really consistent for me with my experience and the privilege I've had of working with a number of really incredible First Nations advocates over, a couple of decades of work, both at ACOS but also in my previous roles. And I'll name, I think Michelle DeShong, who I worked with quite a while ago now, but on women's rights, Antoinette Braybrook, who I continue to work with, Charlena Musk, just to name a few, and each of them in different ways brought so much courage to the work and still do, collaboration, but also that generosity. And I feel so greatly the benefit that I've had of working with them, of learning from them, and of being invited into conversations, into actions, and learning about my own power and my own privilege. I think that Jackie was speaking about this morning and how I can use that. And so in continuing the allyship journey, I think that's something I continue to reflect on, is, when somebody comes to you with such a gift, with such generosity, with such an invitation to join them in action, what is it that we can then bring in return? How do we bring our own power, our own privilege to meet that invitation and accept it?
Thanks, Rowena, that was lovely. So Oxfam Australia firstly, can I acknowledge country? Can I acknowledge the beautiful smoking ceremony this morning? Can I acknowledge both Auntie Barb and Auntie Pat in that phenomenal generosity in sharing with us that experience? And I too found it incredibly moving to listen to both those women, and yes, was struck by the generosity with which we're brought into this journey. So Oxfam Australia's had long-standing, deep community partnerships with First Nations communities all around this country, and that's been the case for us for many decades. And so as an organisation, long before the referendum, we had, as Edwina discussed, we'd made a commitment to the Uluru Statement. We'd thought a lot about what that meant for us as an organisation that's not an Aboriginal community-controlled organisation. We do have a very strong and proud First Peoples team within our organisation, but we identify as a mainstream organisation. So the question we asked ourselves was, what is our role at this time? And we did something actually that we've never done before, which was we went to our several million supporters and asked them to participate in the Allies process. And that was a first for us. And, you know, it could have been that those people said, hey, that's not why we sign up to be part of Oxfam. What are you trying to get us involved with that for? That's not what happened. What happened was that to a person, they responded enthusiastically to the opportunity, and they asked us what they could do and how they could do it. And hence the contribution to the allies piece for us was really about trying to build the support, the infrastructure to support the desire that just in our own supporter base, we could clearly see people wanted to be a part of. So for us, that was a really important choice. It's one that we think served us well. Going to the personal thing, one of the things that Oxfam Australia thinks deeply about is this question, as an organisation that operates internationally, whose flag are we flying when we are operating in an unceded colony? So one of the most special moments for me actually was a time I was in Nairobi with my international colleagues, and there were no First Nations colleagues with me, but I had the opportunity to read the Uluru Statement from the Heart to my global colleagues. And it was an extremely profound moment, not just for me personally, but because this huge group of, you know, more than 30 nations represented came to me afterwards saying, I didn't know this story in this way. How can I help? How can I contribute to the referendum? How can I be involved? So for me, that was personally a really profound moment of making that connection between what we here in Australia are struggling for and the many movements around the world that are keen to see that change. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. So the first question, so this is specifically for you, Catherine, because each person will get a particular question because we've got only 40 minutes left. For someone who wants to become an ally, what are basically the first steps? And also from an individual perspective, but also an organisation thinking of allyship.
Yeah. I think the first thing that we need to do is to demystify allyship, because we do it every day, right? For different people in our lives. So for loved ones, for our children, it starts off there as a parent, you know, what is it that you want? They'll have one of those things. You know, that communication and advocacy as well, but guided by our children. We do it in our workplaces for our colleagues when, you know, we're representing. There are all these different examples in our daily life about what it means to be an ally, but something happens when it comes to the Indigenous space, to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander space especially, and sometimes collectively as a nation we tell ourselves that, you know, we don't want to step on any toes, it's too hard. There was an amazing ally, a local teacher at an event that the Aboriginal Education Consultative Group was running, and he put it in a way that I could never do. He stood there and he said, if you're afraid, you're racist. And I'm like, oh, that's strong words, basically. And I think it goes back to Langton's sort of point around what some of these concerns are. But even that speaks to, for me, there are certain things that we can't say because of the way that we get labelled. You know, when we had the forum for community and business for the Yes campaign, and I think Kerry made a comment Kerry O'Brien made a comment that the Indigenous members of the panel couldn't make because we'd get labelled as targeting, you know, everybody else in the rest of the nation. So I've taken the scenic route there, but so the first thing though, it's easy, right? It's super easy. You just need to think about the relationships that you're in. You need to foster those relationships and to be accountable to them. It's as simple as that. As an organisation, so many, and I think everyone else here will speak to the organisational side of things. It's about figuring out what you stand for at an individual or an organisational level first, and then just acting that way.
Yeah, that's good.
We all know what that means. Yeah.
Or perhaps I'll now go over to Arthur. Can you share some examples of how you've effectively ensured you're being accountable to First Nations people as an ally?
That's a very good question, if I might say so. We actually dealt with that in some depth at the Labor Council with all of our affiliates. In fact, it became a point of contention at one point as to why we were not moving earlier on beginning the campaign. And we had to remind our well-meaning members, in many cases, that it wasn't our decision to make to initiate a campaign in our region on behalf of our First Nations brothers and sisters, that what we needed to do first is have that conversation ourselves directly, so that we knew that there was that level of accountability, if not synchronicity, basically, with the whole thing. So these points are pretty important for us. And whilst some people might say that, well, you don't have to wait to be asked, and we debated that through. We said, that's fine, you don't have to wait to be asked, but don't presume that what you're going to do in leading a campaign, particularly for the Labor Council, because rightly or wrongly, we say rightly, we do have good access to the media and the ability to have a loud voice in the community, and one that is heard. We are fortunate in that respect, but with that comes a lot of responsibility, that you are accountable to the people that you say that you are supporting and being an ally for. So for us, it actually took 6 months. 6 months. And a lot of that was because there was, as we all know, a considerable discussion within the communities here about the way forward. And that meant patience on the part of everybody in dealing with that. But the outcome, though, was so much better for it. And I think the proof of that was on the night where we didn't really like what we were seeing up there in the town hall on the board with the numbers, but the feeling of solidarity in that room was just incredible. And, you know, even though we knew we had lost the vote, we knew we had won a lot of friends and a lot of solidarity and hope for the future, because it was pretty clear that there was that level, not just of respect, but of trust. And I think without those two things, you can't be an ally.
Thanks for that. I might go to Lynn in terms of an organisation trying to create accountability measures, so your authorising environment to be an ally. Can you talk a bit about how Oxfam does that?
I guess there are certain principles, aren't there, that most of us would feel inform allyship, and I think colleagues have been sort of alluding to those. Oxfam, as a partner in Allies, was strongly committed to a First Peoples-led campaign. And that might sound a bit technical if you're not a full-time campaigning organisation as we are, but when you are, that's a significant change to make a decision to operate in a particular way. Followship, we would call it, you know, active followship, learning how to follow. And I think that did create all sorts of tensions throughout the heady period of our sort of campaigning efforts. But holding ourselves accountable to not speaking for others, being led by those who are experts in their own experience, ensuring that the organisation had clear support mechanisms in place to recognise and understand the profound impact that the campaign was having on First Nations communities. And so, like everybody else in this room, we had to navigate the tensions of who were supportive and in what ways, and who were not and did not wish. And, you know, there's a lot of complexity in community. But I think ensuring, and I might not get the chance to say this, and I know Jackie said earlier in the panel, and it's true, it's not just about money, but sometimes it also is about money. And in the sense that in my many years in leadership, I've strongly come to the view that if there is no cash behind something, then it's probably a hollow commitment, right? Like, so for us, it was important that we actually resourced this work, that we supported communities in whatever way we could. And I think that's organisationally, it's the organisational equivalent of going beyond the T-shirt, right? Of going, yep, the T-shirt's cool, the banners on the building are amazing, you know, all of these activities are important, but there is a very deep and painful underbelly to what is occurring through the campaign. And if we're not also attuned to those impacts, not just on the First Peoples team in our own organisation, but on communities generally, then we're kind of missing the point, right? So for us, trying to remain accountable in that very direct way to the lived experience of those that we're working with was, I think, a key part of the accountability, as was the resourcing, and as was, and you know, this was mentioned earlier, being prepared to use one's leadership platform to call out what is wrong when it's wrong, and to be prepared to make those statements, particularly about racism, to my mind, are part of the accountability of that partnership. You know, that if we say we're allies and we say we're here for the fight, what I want to know is how do we show up? The final thing I'll say about that is, there was, during the campaign, and there will continue to be in life, many moments of deep sorry business, many moments of terrible things that happen in community every day. And it's my personal belief, but also as a leader of Oxfam, if we don't show up in those moments as well, when another soul is lost in custody, when babies are removed in most appalling ways, if we're not there for that part, we're not really allies. Yeah.
Thanks. I might go to Edwina now. In terms of that accountability question, what sort of work have you guys been doing in terms of your boards? Like, I know there are some organisations that now have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on their boards, or they've put in some sort of committee. I think Oxfam has a reference committee. So what's happened in terms of ACOS and their experience around working with your board?
So I referred earlier to the statement of solidarity that we put out post-referendum and numbers signed on to. So we've gone through a process both internally but also at our board level in terms of looking at what that means for ACOS. And for us, I mean, one of the key accountability ones was about, well, who are the partners that we are working with, and how do we have meaningful dialogues with them? So we have a number of First Nations-led organisations within our membership, and we're also a member of a number of First Nations-led campaigns. And so the chair of our board, Hango, took on meeting up with, at that board level, the chairs of the boards of each of those organisations, and starting a dialogue process around, well, what does this look like? We've made this commitment. Let's have a conversation around what does this look like for ACOS in terms of really delivering on this. And it was a dialogue. We were really conscious too of that there is a lot of stuff out there already. I think we heard that this morning, that there are a lot of places we can learn and we can come with ideas. So coming forward with ideas about, well, what do we think we can offer? What do we think we can deliver? And how will, how would we put this into practice, and then testing that as part of that dialogue. So we had those individual meetings one-on-one. We then actually had a whole of board dialogue with those organisations and representatives as part of the process of then developing for us what is our pledge, our commitment to action going forward. It does involve changes at our board level around commitments of representation at the board level, which are in the process of being implemented. It also involves commitments throughout all of our work. And then in terms of the accountability mechanisms of embedding that, we've brought that through, it appears in our impact strategy, our 5-year impact strategy, and then into each of the organisational plans. So when we've made these commitments, getting specific around what is it that we're committing to do, How will we make sure that happens? So making sure that's actually feeding through into all of our organisational plans and works. And then also our reporting process. So how do we report back to our board? How does the board keep us as an organisation accountable for those commitments we're making as well? And how do we continue that dialogue also with the First Nations members and the First Nations campaigns, and putting that into an ongoing process. And it is a careful balance, and the conversation we've been having is around how do we create something that is meaningful, that is us delivering, us doing the work, and not creating, more work and more activity for others, but at the same time continuing a meaningful dialogue, having a process for us to keep checking in, keep listening, keep reflecting, and making sure that what we are doing is walking alongside and amplifying the First Nations voices around us, because we know that First Nations people and First Nations organisations have the solutions. They've had the solutions for a long time, and our role is part of supporting and opening those doors and handing over our platforms and our power to ensure that those voices are heard, and that what we see in a policy sense from the government is policy solutions and services that are led by First Nations organisations and people.
Thanks. Craig, what are some of the successful, sorry, I've got his mic. What are some of the successful initiatives you've been involved with in terms of supporting the Uluru Statement from the Heart?
Well, not successful enough. So I would have liked to be much more effective. I think there's a lot of lessons for individuals, for organisations, and for the country moving forward after last year. And it's important that we learn them. Some of the underlying drivers of why what happened. And so, for example, that's, just listening to everyone here who, and all of their brilliant perspectives, I keep coming back to, for example, some of the underwriting or undermining or overriding themes, like, for example, over-concentration of Australian media. And, we can be as effective, we can be almost maximally effective, but in a country where 70% of the public mind is owned by one organisation, which happens to be News Corp, and if that particular organisation takes an opposing view, then you are always going to be extremely challenged. And then we have, the proliferation of misinformation and so on, which is a big challenge for us here. The third one I just wanted to mention was our inability as a country to have actual conversations, and particularly difficult conversations. And we've lost that ability, and it's something that we have to nurture in the next generation. And at the moment, that's extremely challenging, because we have these various people around the world who are telling young males in particular that, First Nations rights or gender equality or these issues are an imposition on their rights. And so we're seeing, I wouldn't say sophisticated, but effective and systemic pushbacks on some of the very basic progress that we've made in recent decades. And that's very, very dangerous. And that impacts a whole range of social justice issues, and in particular, First Nations rights. I think the one perspective on allyship that I would also like to say is that I think it's important to support people in any way that they support, because what we tend to find is people can be inconsistent, and plus most people who supported the Uluru Statement and The Voice don't work in it for a living, and for them to just support it, that's fantastic. But what often happens is people will then say, well, you support it here, but you don't support that. And that's inconsistent, and therefore you're not real. And people get attacked for supporting, and we see that in a lot of social justice movements, that people can never be characterised as being good enough supporters or good enough allies. And I think that is a real challenge that we have to face. And then I just wanted to reflect on, you're talking about speaking and acting. The line that is between, for all of us, this is a reality, there is a line between belief, principle, values, policy, symbolism, and speaking and action. And everyone has a line in every single issue at which it's difficult to get across. That can be because it will affect your living. It can because it will affect your family. It can be because, you know, you don't like being attacked. It can, a whole range of reasons. And where I spend most of my time is trying to get areas that I work in, the particular one is sport, across that line. And to say, so I think it's an interesting conversation in Australia about symbolism to authenticity and actions. For example, there's many examples, and the corporate world is, you know, really fundamentally at the centre of this. It takes, for example, the Woolworths issue with, you know, the dry Indigenous community in Northern Territory, and what came out was that all of a sudden you want to put a Dan Ryan's, I think it's called there or something, right? And there's a big conflagration and everyone's upset about it. And I remember speaking to a good friend of mine, Adam Goods, and he said, oh, well, I'm actually the chair, or he sat on the Indigenous Advisory Council of that organisation. And of course, he wasn't asked. No. So I think we've got to the point where we've got immense amount of Indigenous art, we've got a huge amount of symbolism, we have welcomes to countries, we have all these things, but the question is, how do we get Australia to be prepared to actually act and do what is right? And, you know, I'm interested in whether, so for instance, in The Voice, you know, underlying all of the advocacy is the basic rights of Indigenous peoples around the world. And I think we can connect that, and this theme's already been mentioned, and teach Australians that actually this is just a basic fundamental right here, okay? And this doesn't need a campaign, actually. You know, this doesn't need, you know, what we need is you to understand that this is the reality of Indigenous people everywhere, and the First Nations are connected to that right. And how does that right manifest? Many people believe that, and I don't have a position on this because I'm not a First Nations person, and I listen to them and I want them to tell me, but I am interested in all of the, you know, all of the huge amount of symbolism that corporate Australia, you know, and all of the reconciliation action plans and all of these things, and whether we're in a position now where actually we just need to say to Australia, actually, these are the fundamental rights that we've signed up to. Like there is a Convention on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples around the world, and here's how those rights manifest, and we expect these to be respected, and whether that can push us into a different area now where we can start to see that we have made commitments to something, and we're not even talking about those basic commitments. We're talking about largely a whole range of, you know, more superficial and simplistic things that we can give. In actual fact, we just need to say, okay, we respect the rights that you have, and what does that mean policy-wise? Finally, we've seen this in sport. So in football, for example, we have tried to cross the threshold from Indigenous rounds, Indigenous Advisory Council, and the like, to actual First Nations empowerment and self-determination, which is the right. And say, can we, instead of getting government funding into football and then deciding who we're going to give it to, can we now say, we will come with you for the funding and use our profile and power, and you will run it yourself because that is your right. That's where Australia needs to get to. I can see the challenges that sport, but I do believe that sport can lead that as such a socially powerful and influential cultural institution.
Thanks. Faye, so how can, looking at this question around community involvement, how can local communities be motivated and mobilised to support First Nations justice?
Thanks for the question. I guess I was just thinking about what a few people have been saying, and I think the core work of looking to be able to mobilise as a group of allies, there's a whole heap of work that has to be done before mobilisation, and I think that's where we often jump to the action and want to jump into looking like we're doing something and following on sort of from what Craig's saying, being performative rather than actually useful. And I think what we've got to be able to do is engage in a truth-telling process in this country, and then ensure as allies that we are unlearning and re-educating ourselves and locating ourselves in our own history and taking responsibility for that. And there has to be a really strong internal process of welcoming and inviting that uncomfortability and sitting in it and leaning in it and staying in it in order to actually become an effective ally. And I think that's what we try and do in terms of that local community engagement. And I think there's a couple of people here from the Shoalhaven Walking Together Alliance here today that what we found from the Yes campaign and from a whole heap of people on the South Coast becoming mobilised for a lot of people for the very first time, and they hadn't championed, Aboriginal rights or even human rights potentially before. So what we found was that was amazing and fantastic, but it was also, in some ways, it was problematic in some ways. And post-referendum, what a lot of people have done, unfortunately, is drop off because of that. But the people who haven't dropped off are starting to do the work that they need to do on a personal level and a professional level in order to become an ally. You don't just get to be an ally, you've got to do the work. And I think that's where we are trying very much at Waminda we've got 180 people employed at Waminda. 75% of those people are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, but it still means there's a lot of non-Indigenous people working there. We're the biggest risk to the organisation. So we need to continue to do a whole heap of work around that and not just externalise what it looks like to be a good ally. I think it's highly risky to do that. So we work with community who want to become mobilised and who want to be further engaged or to sit in the space of decolonising practice and to actually locate yourself in the history of this country and where have you come from and how do you locate yourself? Where's your family from? And understanding what truth-telling actually truly means before becoming mobilised. And I think that's just really important to do first.
Thanks for that.
If you don't mind, sorry. It's very difficult for me to stay quiet this long. Just one thing, so one of a couple of things, really the theme that sort of runs throughout what everyone has said, they've talked about relationship and relationship with First Nations communities, with individuals. There are some historic, some long-standing relationships and the need for those relationships moving forward and into the future, the need to not drop off. Everything comes back to relationship in terms of allyship. The second thing is that whilst you can behave or aspire to be a good ally, we get to decide if we get to decide what allyship looks like and whether or not an individual or an organisation is an ally. There's an awful lot of organisations and individuals which, as we've spoken about, who have dropped off, who stood up front and sort of announced that they were allies. And they've disappeared and they've assumed that title themselves. But really it's the communities that you're responsible to, it's the relationships that you're accountable to that get to determine whether or not you get to wear that title.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and in this context, so LS Uluru, we came out with a statement of recommitment post the referendum and talking about particularly focusing on what was happening around those key themes of voice, truth, and treaty. So I'm fortunate because I'm from Victoria. We have a treaty process happening right now. They've got a treaty rules, treaty umpire. The First Peoples Assembly of Victoria is the voice, and we have a truth process, the Uluru Justice Commission. So we're rich in that sort of stuff in Victoria, and quite recently the Assembly have developed Allies for Treaty group, and it's only just started and kicking around. So there's massive opportunities for organisations or national organisations who've got Victorian connections to be part of that process. So now we're a long way down the track in Victoria, and there's stuff happening in Queensland, New South Wales. I think the treaty commissioners are going to be in the next month or so announced. So there's a voice happening in South Australia. So there's stuff that people can do now, even while we wait for the dust to settle on the national process. So the final question, you get basically a minute each because we've got to finish 10 minutes, is where do you see your organisation or where you sit in this allyship around those questions about particularly truth and treaty processes now? So we'll go with Lynn because she's got a taxi in about 7 minutes, sorry, and then down the line.
Thanks for reminding me. So just checking I've understood the question. You're asking where do we stand now in relation to
with the current processes that are happening around truth and treaty.
Yeah, it's probably, so there's two things. I mean, folks have spoken a lot about doing the work and I totally endorse that. I also think that Edwina's point was an important one. Work out what your unique contribution is. So Oxfam the world over knows the relationship between rights and outcomes, right? So for us, it's sharing that message with the Australian public. Our recommitment has been a slow and gentle one. We are in listening mode. We have reconfirmed our resourcing commitment, our continued wish to work collaboratively. We recognise the multidimensional nature of the Uluru Statement from the Heart and the myriad opportunities that gives us to plug in. So from our perspective, there is a lot of listening in this time as well as a commitment to action. Sure. Yeah.
Just reflecting also on the comments from the previous panel around continuing the conversation. And I think for us, that's very, very much, we've obviously got some kind of very clear commitments and actions we're making to our First Nations members at ACOS. But part of it, when I kind of broaden the horizon out to the federal sphere, which is the focus of ACOS's advocacy, is that bit around continuing the conversation. And there's probably two bits of that for us. One is the within our own sector. So what is it that we are trying to change amongst ourselves within the community sector and us as organisations? How as a sector are we better partners? What are the partnership principles? How do we look at transferring power and privilege, but also, funding is a key one, supporting funding to go to First Nations-led organisations to deliver First Nations services, to community. And then looking externally, and I know many of us are, following the comments from the Prime Minister over the weekend and what's followed, and Auntie Pat's, courageous response also on Monday to that. And I think we're in a situation politically where we can see that the major parties aren't keen to be continuing this conversation as part of upcoming election conversation. And I heard this morning from Auntie Pat also about the power that we have, and we've heard the 6 million people, and I think it is on us and us as individuals and as organisations. Well, we keep having that conversation. We can keep asking, we can talk to our local members, we can bring it through in our individual conversations and in our organisational advocacy, and continue to talk about it, to talk about voice, treaty, truth, to ask the questions of what's happening and to reinforce the importance of action and of implementation of that commitment, and continue, to not let the major parties get away with saying, well, this isn't a conversation we want to be having, and to be backing out of that. There's 6 million people who signed up. It's, we're not just fair weather friends. We're here to continue that even when that's not the political conversation that others want to be having. And I think that'll be a focus for us, in the budgetary context. We've got MyEFO coming up at the end of the year, and then we've got the broader election conversation and making sure it continues to be part of what we're talking about when we're bringing through our public advocacy and also our direct advocacy into Parliament.
Yeah, quite similar. I guess our approach very much is continuing the action, continuing the conversations, but drawing more and more people into those conversations. I think it's a very deliberate approach that we have that's led by the strong Aboriginal women at Waminda to reach out to the people who are circling around, wondering what to do, and to look at the processes that we can engage with those people. So it's quite a deliberate process of amplifying the voices, staying in the conversation, making sure that people are continuing to be present, but more than present. What are they doing? How are they doing it? We've also got a political strategy that, hasn't stopped, but is also increasing in I guess, weight, attempting to have those conversations with the people we need to speak to, from everyone from the Prime Minister down to local members and people like, Andrew Constance is attempting to become a member again. So just trying to hold people to account with who they are, what they do, the local council, everybody within all of our funding departments. We have those conversations. We're holding everyone in community accountable about their reconciliation action plans, which is usually, from our experience, pretty hollow, and a way to do less rather than more. So for us, and I'll be led by the women who I walk alongside and behind. It's all about action, but it's not just the doing in a performative way. It's being informed and learning and unlearning, and not just doing it when someone's watching.
I'll try and summarise this in 3 key points. The first is about our approach and what has actually happened here. Our opponents will always try and frame a contest, a bit like a soccer match, football match. Someone wins, someone loses. It's what we say is ahistorical, lacks contest. It's about you win, I win, you lose. I'm more powerful than you. Don't raise your voice again. That's crudely the way some people want to interpret these things. The reality is the Liberal Party lost the last federal election. They got less than 40% primary vote. Did they disband? Did they disband? They'd go away and say, well, slash our wrists, just go away. It's all over, Red Rover. Of course they don't. The world doesn't work like that. History doesn't work like that. Don't let our opponents in this, when I say our opponents, those that do not wish well of people, do not want to promote unity, do not want voices or equality or justice, to frame the contests that they set up like straw people so that they can knock them down, because that is what they do. The second is related to that, and I draw on my background within the Labor movement here. I always say, and delegates here from the Labor Council will know, history is the worker's friend. Our history is everything. We can't build a future if we don't have that appreciation of our history. It is no accident that arch conservatives and the ultra-right do not want truth told. Because if that truth is not told, they can continue lying about it. They do not want you or me telling the truth about history, because that's not our job, that's theirs. Because the way they see it is that history is written by the victors. Our response should be that the future, though, is determined by the survivors. Our job is to ensure that they don't win on that. And we have one big advantage, and this is the third point, that our opponents will never have. And that is, we don't just have a plan, but we have a vision of what the world should look like, of how to make a better life and a better world for everyone. They never have that. They don't want people focusing on that. They want misery to continue to be the currency and to continue to be the focus. They don't want people reflecting on the past, the present, or the future. They want to keep dividing. We can offer something that those people will never be able to do, and that is a future, and that's where the hope comes from. Let's keep doing that and pushing back against their attempts to rewrite that history, to stop the truth being told, and to set up their own contests. They can have their contests. We will continue the struggle.
Look, we're not going anywhere. I guess after 65,000 plus years, we've demonstrated that now. I think that's fairly conclusive. So we're just going to keep on keeping on. We've got no other choice. I have the immense privilege of being in the Indigenous Strategy Unit and working as well with Woolyungah Indigenous Centre, where we get to care for our future leaders. And we are in an institution of learning where we have the ability to influence our leaders more broadly as well, that are emerging and the spaces that they're going into. And so Yeah, our commitment is to, on behalf of our teams, is to just keep up with that, because that's how we create change. As the first panel said, and as others here have said as well, our children are the ones that are going to make the difference, and our responsibility is to create the space and provide the framework and give the opportunities to them so that then they can do that.
Okay, thanks. Well, I've really enjoyed listening to everyone, amazing people and perspectives. I would just say finally that there are many differences between us all in Australia, and there are powerful forces trying to impose other views on it. But one thing is common among all of us is that as humans, we want to be part of something. We want to be part of a movement. We want to be part of a tribe. And they can be constructive or destructive, as we see, for example, in the UK at the moment. 6 million people in Australia wanted to see immensely positive, transformational change happen. 6 million people is a hell of a lot. 6 million people is a movement. And I'm inspired by First Nations Australia now bringing all 6 million of us along, and in the next, in this next period, continuing that movement. Because if I see in the next year that I'm part of that, everyone who had the strength to step forward and the respect to step forward and say, I'm with First Nations Australia. If 6 million people can do that, given what, was against last year and those powerful forces, that 6 million can change this country. That has to be one of the largest collective amounts of a social movement, perhaps in the history of the country. But don't forget all the referendums previous, the population has now escalated a huge amount. That may be the largest ever. If I start to feel, and I'm inspired to think that in the next few years, I can feel that I'm part of 6 million people in Australia that's bringing another person along, another person along, another person along, another person along, and that can use the referendum of last year for that purpose to change the face of this country rightfully and respectfully, I'm excited about the future.
That's terrific. Yeah, I think we need to remember that more people voted yes than voted for Labor or Liberal or any of the parties in the previous election, because we got to close to 40%, whereas the other parties were in the mid-30s or less. So I want to thank our panellists for a really great conversation. I think, people's genuine allyshipness was pretty clear, and continue in your various workspaces and the work you do with your community. So I want, if we can thank the panel. Right here.
Really, really marvellous conversation. That could have gone on and on, but I know tummies are rumbling. It's just about lunchtime. Craig Foster, I think, summed it up when he said half an hour or so ago, we don't need a campaign. We had a campaign last year. I thought it was a pretty good campaign, but it didn't work. But what is needed is people, and people like you and I and the panellists in the room. People will make the difference. Allies will make the difference, and partnerships will make the difference. And that's really what today is all about. For those who are facilitating the tabletop sessions after lunch, would you come for a very short briefing immediately that we break for lunch? So that's in the next minute or two, just down here to my left. That would be fantastic. For those of you who enjoyed Auntie Donna's sweet treats, why not take some home for the family? You shouldn't have all the fun. There's also some wonderful crafts by local Indigenous suppliers at the back of the room. Check them out. Take a little present. It's nearly Father's Day. Christmas is coming. There's always an excuse to buy something very special. We break now until 1 o'clock, so a little over half an hour. Grab some food at the back of the room. For those back online at 1 o'clock, we'd like to start pretty much on time, and please take a moment to sign the guest book. Please thank our panel again, and before they go, I'd like to get a quick photograph. Welcome back, everyone, both here in the room and online. I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch and are ready for a great afternoon of more information and more exploration. Our second keynote speaker is a passionate advocate for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, Yorta Yorta woman, Dr. Summer May Finlay. Summer May has worked for a number of organisations in Aboriginal community-controlled health, not-for-profit, university and for-profit sectors. And she's recognised as a leader in public health and as a senior lecturer here at the University of Wollongong. Summer May will explore concepts of allyship, accountability and action in the context of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander justice and the importance of meaningful and sustained support from allies. Please welcome Dr. Summer May Finlay.
I have my phone because I need a timer, because anyone who knows me well knows I can talk all day. You can hear my children are here, so I have my fan club with me. Before we start, of course, I would just like to acknowledge we are on Dharawal country of the Woolyungah people. As a Yorta Yorta woman, this is not my country, but this is country that is special to me because this is where I have birthed my children, raising my family. It's where I live and work. This is country who supports me in everything that I do. So I am eternally grateful for those that have continued to look after it for millennia and for those that will look after it in the future. I just want to thank Jeremy for doing that introduction. Our bios are one thing, aren't they? But who we are is a lot more than that. I am a mum of two beautiful girls. I'm a daughter, I'm a godmother, and of course I am an academic, but that title fits a little less comfortably than the other titles. I have some notes, it helps me keep on track. And I just want to have a bit of a conversation today. I don't have a PowerPoint. I did design one and I was ambivalent about whether I was going to use it, and I've decided we're just going to have a chat, so I hope that's okay. I was reflecting before this, the last time I was actually on this stage was when I graduated in 2014, I think, with my Master of Public Health. This is I work here at the university and I haven't been back on this stage since then. It is an absolute privilege to be sitting here, particularly after the presentation you heard from this morning by Auntie Pat. Amazing woman. We have heard from Jeff Scott, Jackie Adams, Bronwyn Fredericks, Thomas Mayer, all people that I know and have a huge amount of respect for. Their contribution, particularly to the advocacy and the promotion of the Uluru Statement, is unparalleled. And Mike, did that mic just, yes, dropping in and out. And Jackie Adams as well, who I've had the privilege of spending the last couple of days with from Fred Hollows, talking about allyship and accomplices. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, allyship and accomplices. As has already been discussed, the Uluru Statement is an absolute gift to this country, and predominantly to the 97%, most of Yep. Thank you. Now I can't talk in my hands. Sorry. The Uluru Statement is absolutely needed. The gift that is in there in terms of voice, treaty and truth is needed now as much as it was previously. You would have heard the Productivity Commission report outline the targets and whether we're on track under the Closing the Gap. 5 of them are not on track. Life expectancy, rates of suicide, which is increasing, incarceration, out-of-home care and overcrowding. Those statistics represent not a nameless, faceless people. They represent my family, my community, my friends, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across this country. We have higher rates of out-of-home care than we did under the Stolen Gen. We have children living not knowing their identity, not knowing their culture. We have people taken out of their communities and incarcerated. We can't even, in a wealthy country, make sure that we have enough adequate housing for mob. And the suicide rate is a symptom of all of the stuff that's going on in this country. That is why our allies are hugely important. We're 3% of the population. We can't do this alone, and you know that. And I need to share with you this stuff and how it makes me feel. Because you see those statistics, and what you see is the number. You see it with your head. We need you to see it with your heart. What we genuinely need, as you know, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here, is substantive change. What does it take to get substantive change? We need a seismic shift in the way we're currently addressing things in this country. And again, the lion's share of that burden should not be on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It should be on the 97%. What this means is that, and this is going to be a theme through my chat today, is we need people to be uncomfortable. We need you to be uncomfortable. The status quo maintains those statistics at the very best, and at the worst, it makes them get worse. Every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person in this room and outside of this room, their families are in those statistics. So I'm here because I wrote 2 articles which seem to resonate with people. The first one was with NITV on how to be a good ally. I'm assuming that some of you, if not all of you, have read that, and I just actually wanted to summarise what was in there. And I wrote this because at a time I felt like people needed to hear what those actions were that you needed to do to be a good ally. And this was from my perspective. I don't claim to be a fountain of all knowledge on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, or to speak from all of us, and I just want to actually say that. But for people to be an ally, they need to preference our voices, using your privilege to make sure we are heard on issues that impact us. Good allies are okay with not being part of the conversation. Blackfellas make the decisions around what needs to happen, and you guys get behind us and help drive that forward. Good allies are there for the good times and the bad times. Not just putting up a black image on social media, but there when the going gets hard, like right now. We have hope, but it doesn't mean it's not hard. One of the big things I always encourage, and I'm hoping that people in this room already do this, is say something when you hear something inappropriate. Another thing is, don't take it personally when we don't agree with you. And don't go it alone. And one of the big things is understand, and I think that was obvious during the referendum debate, that we're not all the same. The second was published in 2022 by Croaky Health Media. And can I just say, and I shared this with Fred Hollow's mob the other day, this article almost didn't get published. This was actually written by ABC in the lead up to Reconciliation Week. And on the day that it was due to be published, ABC pulled it because it was too political. So I'm very, very lucky to have friends in the media who would just publish it. And this one talked about, where do you fit? Are you a tokenist, an ally, or an accomplice? I'm not going to go into the tokenist. I'm assuming that no one in this room is actually a tokenist. But if you haven't read the article, I encourage you to read the article. Allies are what I was describing. before. But I want to talk about accomplice. That's the next step, right? That is genuinely people who are with us at all times. They lift us up, they pick us up, they open doors, they create spaces, they use their privilege to their own disadvantage and risk. That's what we need. I have a privilege as an Aboriginal person with a reasonable level of education and socioeconomic status. It's my job to make sure that I am also opening doors and making sure that voices that don't have the platform that I have, and I clearly have a platform, are heard. And we need you to do that too. The big thing about allies, and we were talking about this with Fred Hollows over the last couple of days, is you, me, we. This is a collective action. This requires a collective response. You don't hear very many Aboriginal people talking about we, about I, sorry. It's all about we. It's all about the collective. And we need you to be with us as accomplices, even when it's not convenient. But you do have a challenge as non-Indigenous people. Where's the line between being an accomplice and also being maybe a culturally appropriation? It's all right, we'll keep you in check, but I am aware that that is a challenge. But taking that risk is something you need, but also listening when maybe you've overstepped is also something we need you to do. We need you to be political. My whole existence is political. My parents' marriage was political. My birth was political. My dad's white. That's where I get my freckles from. My mum's Aboriginal. When my dad went to get some tools off a friend, apparently he said to his wife after my dad left, "You should see the colour of Mark's daughter." Me identifying as Aboriginal is political. So you can imagine how political it is working at a university as an Aboriginal person. And even standing here is political. Between the political nature of who and what we are and our lived reality, our allies and accomplices, we need you like we've never needed you before. At least in my lifetime. I am sure generations before have probably said the same thing. And as I said before, to do that, we need you to get very uncomfortable. So I want you to be okay with being uncomfortable. The kind of uncomfortable that makes you squirm in your seat still. When you're actually wondering what the fallout of this is going to be. The kind which leaves you doubting yourself. I'm sure most women in the room have heard this particular saying before, by Lauren Thatcher Ulrich. Well-behaved women seldom make history. Well, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people seldom make history by being well-behaved either. And I can't say I'm particularly well-behaved. And I'm asking you to also not be particularly well-behaved. As I said before, we need to challenge that status quo which is seeing my mob dying, seeing them dying by increased rates of suicide and increased numbers of our children in out-of-home care. I regularly make people uncomfortable, I've told, when I talk about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander issues. One of my colleagues has even told me a while back that my controversialness waxes and wanes. The majority of people don't like getting uncomfortable. We like to stay where we know. We like to stay in our little box. We like to quantify and qualify everything, which is why very many people at a university prefer qualitative research because they get to accurately describe it. The grey, which is qualitative, which is that not being able to adequately describe things often makes people uncomfortable. And while you sit in the dominant culture comfortably, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and peoples from other cultures sit very uncomfortably. So while we're asking you, or I'm asking you to be uncomfortable, I want you to know we are often uncomfortable, if not most of the time. At 43, I've been uncomfortable a lot. And quite frankly, particularly after the referendum, I was tired. I have a 1-year-old and an almost 3-year-old. They're not the reason I'm tired. I know I regularly speak up on issues relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and every time I do, I need to tell you I'm uncomfortable. I may look and sound okay here on the stage. I get nervous every time I get up here. How is it going to resonate with you? Are you actually going to walk away from this going, why? No, that's not what I need to do. And every time we voice something, we're thinking about the possible unintended consequences that we can or cannot predict. Every time I sit here, I am vulnerable. And I think most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people will understand this when I say we have very few places where we're actually comfortable. So much that I know when I leave the house, I put on my mental armour. Armour has become a reflex. We walk into a meeting, we walk into a space that's predominantly non-Aboriginal people, and we do that as a matter of course. It's the only way we can get through. It protects me from the disease of racism, the disease of complacency, and quite frankly, willful ignorance, which is what we saw with a lot of people who voted no at the referendum. Willful ignorance. All of those which are chronic conditions our society suffers from. I, like most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, need to put on that mental armour to avoid dying a death by 1,000 cuts. It's always the small things, but they get you. And can I just say, home is not always a safe place. Not when we've got, you know, you're flicking through the channels and you see people like Andrew Bolt, who's been at it again, Pauline Hanson, Peter Credlin. They still occasionally make their way into my private spaces on the TV, radio, online, social media, and unfortunately my phone. Therefore, as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we are rarely, ever completely safe unless we decide we want to shut ourselves off completely from the outside world, a possibility I don't think any of us could tolerate. So again, I ask you as allies and accomplices to be uncomfortable. Wherever you are now, take it to the next level and enter that zone of uncomfortableness. I want you to be so uncomfortable you start saying stuff about our Prime Minister effectively walking back his commitment to Makarrata. Exercise your democratic rights. My local MP might be getting a call if she's listening. He is a person with immense power and privilege. He leads a party that collectively has an overwhelming amount of privilege and power. And quite frankly, I think they're being cowards. I want you to be uncomfortable and be okay with being uncomfortable that we're still reeling in some ways from the outcome of the referendum. I was interviewed the other day by some students who were doing a research project on the impact of the referendum, and I was caught off guard, and I actually cried, and I am not a crier. I didn't actually realise I was still carrying that much pain. It's an outcome that has emboldened racists in this country, as you will see. Therefore, we need to do more. You need to do more. You need to ask your friends, colleagues, and family to do more. As I said, you need to exercise your privilege to our advantage. The privilege that most of you have benefited from comes from the colonial takeover of our country and the subjugation of our ancestors that continues today. I need you to remember we can never walk away, and we are asking you to do the same, to never walk away. If you stay in your comfort zone, We are perpetually going to live uncomfortable lives with the cycle of trauma never broken. I do want to say, obviously change is possible and change has happened. I sit here today because of all of the work that the elders and ancestors have done before. I need to recognise that I am privileged sitting here. My mum would not have had this privilege. She left school at 13 to work in a factory. She wanted to be a nurse. She didn't see that as an option for her. But I want it to be that rather than being the exception, my existence is the rule. I want to see a better future for my kids. I don't want them to feel the pain the first time they have someone call them an abo at the age of 8. I don't want them to have to protect themselves from the mental load and the mental anxiety. I just want them to be Aboriginal, to experience their culture, to celebrate that culture, and do in life whatever they want to do and just happen to be Aboriginal. I want them to live a life free of racism, and more than that, I want it to be a life that celebrates our culture with us. So again, I ask you to do more. I ask you to help fulfill my aspirations for my children, their children, and everyone else's children, either born or unborn in this country. I want you to help us make a world where they can be Aboriginal and they are celebrated for it and they can know their culture like every other child should have. I want that to be a reality. So I want to leave you with 3 questions. I want you to ask yourself, why are you here? Why are you here? I didn't talk about accountability, but I think it kind of is obvious. I want you to actually think about who you're accountable to. When you're working in our space, when you're advocating for us and with us, who are you accountable to? And the other question that I would ask you to think about is, what are you doing when nobody is looking? So I ask you to move from allies, which I think is a great, great support, to accomplices, to people who stand with us at all times, who are uncomfortable with us, and celebrate the successes with us. So thank you.
Summer May, thank you for that. Insightful, provocative and challenging. As part of the 97%, I get it. I feel uncomfortable. In fact, I feel shame and embarrassment. But in the years ahead, we need many, many more of that 97%, our 97%, to feel less comfortable, to feel uncomfortable. And only when that happens can we make change. So it's over to us, allies. Thanks very much again, Summer May. I hope that's set the scene so brilliantly for what's to come next. We're now going to move into our group tabletop discussions, both here and online, to support us to engage in meaningful and practical conversations on how to champion allyship in our networks and in our lives. For those of you here in person, we will split into 5 groups. For those of you online, we haven't forgotten you. Don't go anywhere. At tables 1 and 2, those who've nominated to be involved in the discussion about the allyship partnership or allyship pathway from ally to accomplice, when we break, make your way to the tables at the rear of the room to my right, where you'll find Tammy and Claire, I hope, who'll guide your discussions. At tables 3 and 4, where the topic is increasing allyship within your organisation, your tables are at the centre of the room and Holly and Tulane will be facilitating. And if you forget which one you're in, the actual title of your topic will be on the back of the number on your table. Tables 7 and 8, your topic is tables 5 and 6, your topic, increasing allyship within your community. You'll find Sally and Stephen at tables to the left. For tables 7 and 8, your topic is having conversations with your board and executive leadership team. Thank you to Rod and Trish for guiding that group. You're meeting at tables to the very rear of the room to the left. Tables 9 and 10, you'll be discussing an ally for one is an ally for all, embedding allyship across all contexts. And thanks to Amar and John for facilitating that conversation. And you'll be at the centre of the room. And just in case we have too many people, we have an overflow area, tables 11 and 12 at the back far right. We won't, when we do the reporting back after your tabletop session, we'll actually do it from the tables. So once we've finished, I'll call time, I'll give you a warning, stay where you are at your tables and we'll report back from those tables. For those doing the reporting back, if you could stand on your feet, we'll have a microphone in your hand, we'll all be able to hear you. So hopefully that works. So while people are finding their space, for those of you online, your breakout session is happening on WebEx. If you're watching on YouTube, there should be a WebEx link you can go to. You'll be hosted online by Jackie from the Fred Hollows Foundation. We've allowed close to an hour for your discussions. Let's get some great conversations going, and I look forward to hearing back from all the groups when we reconvene at around about 2:15. Enjoy your discussions. We're going to start the report back session now, groups. So we'll start with the first group on my left. I'll call it Group 1. And as a reminder, Group 1, have I got your attention? Group 1, the allyship pathway. No, it's allyship within the community. Sally and Stephen were the facilitators. Your attention, please. Stephen's reporting back on his 2-minute report back. Let's give Stephen.
Hello.
Thank you, Stephen. Take over.
We had great energy. God, it's weird hearing a voice coming from over there. Great energy in this group. 3 themes that we're reporting back. One is lobbying for action, particularly against the Labor Party for backing out on the Makarrata. And the thought there is it would be very helpful to have a template of some kind with some key points for people to email to Alison Burns, for example, and some talking points if people want to go a step further and arrange a meeting with her. The second point is that emerged was for people to do more self-education, to learn more about what the Uluru Statement means and what's happening. There are lots of resources out there, websites and so forth, for us to learn so we can then share them with our neighbours, colleagues, families, clubs that we're associated with, etc. And the third point that emerged was using our community connections to promote the Uluru Statement from the Heart and further action. And a lovely example was someone shared that in her book club, she's deliberately choosing books that make people uncomfortable, that tell stories tell the truth about what's been happening in the past. And also just for building connections, we hope everyone will join the Friends of Woolyungah. And I think Jeremy has already shown a way of doing that. So
I think if you can, use that QR code where there's an opportunity to put a comment and just explain that you'd like to join the Friends of Woolyungah. And I think your email address will be in there, or if it's not, make sure it is. And you should be joining up very quickly. So great ideas, thank you.
That's the end of our
great.
report.
Nice report back. You'll note Stephen faced this way so we can get the camera on him. So we've now got the next group allyship within your organisation. Holly and Tulane were the facilitators. Over to you, team.
Hello. Okay, so our top three points that we discussed was the first that this is really hard within organisations, but that's exactly why we should step in and not out. Racism is one of the key barriers, if not the key barrier, to progressing allyship within our organisations. And so we need to call that out. And lastly, looking at our processes and structures and decolonising those within our organisations, whether that be leadership models or decision-making processes.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Holly. Love these snappy report backs. Thanks, guys. The next table is the allyship pathway from ally to accomplice. Tammy and Claire, we're in charge.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. So we had a lot of discussions at our individual tables and a limited time to share more broadly, so I'll share as much as I possibly can. One of the big conversations that we had around going on our allyship journey was around knowing ourselves. So trying to understand our location in history, our position in the world, the things that have influenced us, and not being afraid to sort of acknowledge that we don't know everything and that, we do need to go on a process of unlearning as much as learning as well. And Tammy shared with us around contextualizing yourself through stories of like learning stories from country and learning, the history of this land as well. We also talked about the importance of, again, in terms of learning about ourselves, but being good allies, it's a process of slowing down, being quite thoughtful, being reflective, really listening. That takes time and space, and slowing down is really, really important part of that. And being a good ally is creating space, not just for other people, but within our minds as well, to sit and reflect and then take deliberative and thoughtful action. We also talked about some different examples where people might have really good intentions, but have potentially been misplaced. So part of being a good ally is questioning ourselves and what we do. Maz shared a great example of colleagues who had a really wonderful program welcoming international students into the university and sharing, First Nations art. But that was being taught by non-Indigenous people who didn't necessarily know the background and all of the sort of rich depth of history, culture that sat behind it. And so the work of Good Allies was actually taking that well-intentioned work and engaging with Woolyungah Indigenous Centre to make sure that that was, actually underpinned by community and respectful of culture. So that was a really great example of that work. And there was also an example shared of the great work at Kids Uni, and we saw those beautiful children here earlier today. In that work, those programs have found that increasing visibility and doing these programs with children has actually led to really amazing outcomes in terms of education and advocacy towards parents as well. And part of the success that those allies have had have also been around embedding decolonising practices into policies and into the processes of their organisation, not just relying on the good intentional will of an individual, but making sure that even when those staff move on or whatnot, the policies and processes for their work are sound. Did you want to know? Sorry, there was so much more that we discussed, but I'll leave it there.
No, that's great. And we'll capture all of these great ideas. Slowing down, that's going to be a challenge for many of us in this room. So thank you. Thank you. Now to the back left-hand side, this is the having conversations with your board and executive leadership team. I think Rod and Trish had control of that group.
Thank you. So we surfaced a number of barriers and then talked about some strategies for addressing those. So some of the barriers were fear of getting things wrong, feeling the pressure to be neutral, politically neutral, to our publics, and that resulting in paralysis in action. Some who oppose progress, withholding their engagement and therefore creating a silencing effect within their organisations. And then the strategies that we were discussing sort of crossed a spectrum, but beginning with working on statements and principles. So just really simple process of saying what the organisation stands for and what it's prepared to support. And that can then be leveraged into a whole range of other actions once you establish that foundational set of principles. Working from another approach of sort of grassroots up, or taking a guerrilla approach of just finding the small opportunities wherever they arise and grabbing those opportunities and moving things forward piece by piece within the organisation. And then working on the education front, using significant days, cultural respect training, exposing people to ideas, trust building, investing in building relationships within boards and execs and across organisations. And that takes time and space to set those spaces up where trust building can occur and have difficult conversations. And then a really interesting observation about being vulnerable as leaders and showing humility as leaders to admit when you've done things that are wrong or made mistakes, and how that can be quite a powerful turning point in an organisation and create a safety for other people to speak out and express and move forward and create success. Thanks.
Terrific, thank you. And finally, it's an ally for one is an ally for all, embedding allyship across all contexts. Final group in the centre of the room. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Look, we had a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. We had some very clever people here with some very good stories. And so our job, we saw it as really trying to how to spread the word, how taking those opportunities, looking for the low fruit to build allies and to inform allies better. We talked about it at a personal level in terms of personal spheres of influence and how we work about it then. Then we talked about it at an organisational level and what you could do. And then one of the challenges that we identified was really how do you connect as well? How do you maintain that connect with Aboriginal organisations or people over time? Because that's a real challenge for many as well. A lot of people, Australians, have never met an Aboriginal person. That's the way it is. So going back to the working within your personal sphere of influence, we started off with family members, of course, and was a good example of that, and coming round to neighbours and how you tackle difficult conversations, but you have to do that, and you wear things, you look for smart ways to do that. We then talked a bit broader about, someone who worked in the sort of gender and climate area. They might be really passionate about gender or climate issues, but not so knowledgeable about Indigenous First Peoples, First Nations issues. So there's an opportunity to bring people in areas where you might find things. There was another great example. Well, we started then talking about, and I think our best brainstorming was really about acknowledgement to country. We're all very familiar with it now, and there's a danger in a sense that, and you see it in some organisations, that it's just lip service. And so we talked about how do you get creative with acknowledgement of country. And there was a great example here from Chris, how he managed to convince his organisation to take it into music, to actually write it out and to get a musical piece written around acknowledgement of country. Another great example here from a South Coast high school where they teach the Darug language, to level 7 students, and they actually do the national anthem. It's not the acknowledgement of country by any means, but they do it in the Darug language, and that's a way of sort of spreading that message and just being creative with acknowledgement of country, I think, is the central idea. Sometimes you can relate it to water, land, animals, whatever it is, depending on the context in which you're speaking, whatever the meeting is. If you've got the privilege of being asked to do the acknowledgement of country in that particular gathering. So I thought that was very good. What else have we got? So, anything else?
I think that's plenty. We've got that.
Oh yeah, how to connect. Yeah, how to connect. So in that context, we actually mentioned the wonderful Friends of Woolyungah, which came out of the referendum campaign here in the Illawarra, which was a really great initiative. You know, we had a great database of supporters. We had a strong campaign. And the fact that we were able to move them into a new context, being the Friends of Woolyungah, which is, you know, key behind this gathering here today, was a piece of brilliance for those who came up with that idea. And I think we're still welcoming people through Jamie Beveridge and other at the centres to become Friends of Woolyungah, because it becomes a more constant, consistent way of us being allies and coming across opportunities to help. There is also a WhatsApp group for, not sure what it's called. What's it called? Jeremy?
I'll just have a quick look on my phone. Something like Indigenous Allies for the Illawarra.
Yeah, which quite a lot belong to, and it becomes a bit of a, you know, information exchange. It does beep a little bit on your phone, but you get that, like, some things are uncomfortable. You've got to tolerate them to
Indigenous Allies
stay with the
Illawarra,
game.
104 members.
There you go, 100 friends. Yeah, so we might talk a little bit more how you can join that, but that's an important thing. So connection, I think, is the other key theme that we came through with. Anything else, team?
That's great, John. Thanks to you and your team. We've got Jackie and her online group, a quick report back. They've had a great discussion too.
Thank you. Yeah, we split our session into three. So the first part, we listened to an allyship poem called Snakes and Ladders by a young Zimbabwe-born Aotearoa poet, Takanda, and it was deliberately chosen to be a little bit confronting. So we took the time to think about our reflections after listening to the poem. And we were very fortunate also to be joined by the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, Katie Kiss. So thank you, Katie. And she talked to rebuilding a sense of trust, listening to hear, not listening to respond. And I can't remember who said it, but in part of my travels, someone said we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should be listening more than we speak. So we reflected on the poem, and there were some amazing reflections. We also talked a case study of you're at a party with an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleague, friend or family, and someone makes a racist remark to them. What do you do? So we spoke through that. We spoke through some examples, and the one I want to share is from an 8-year-old who was sitting in the room with his mum listening to us talking. And she said, what would you do? And he said, well, I would say that that's not nice and walk away. And then he thought about it. And then he came back and would speak to them about why that is not nice. So out of the mouths of babes, as we say. Shaz also talked to attending Waminda's decolonisation workshop and would recommend that for people to talk to. And then we spoke about, okay, so you've heard all this stuff today. We've been a bit challenged by what we're hearing. We're being challenged by the poetry. You know, you're in situations where you're defending others or speaking up for others. So what is your action from here? Will it stay the same? Will it change? And how do you encourage others to take action as well? So we spoke about that, and we talked about thinking about places one has power and privilege. Use one's influence to bring other potential allies closer. And I think someone said earlier this morning that, you know, before we get to action, we've got to do all this other work. Well, doing the other work is an action. Just thinking about what you need to do or being challenged by something, that's still an action. Action doesn't have to be grandiose or big. So thank you. That was our group online.
Thanks very much, Jackie, and to the online group. Folks, we've got about 10 minutes to go. I'd love you to do the quickest change to come to the front of the room. We've got one more presenter to wrap us up, and it'll be a much more intimate finale if we're all in the same space. So if you could do that for me, please. Avoid the temptation to be distracted by cakes and shopping and even a bathroom stop. If we can do this all in 1 minute, that would be great. Thank you for a fantastic bunch of ideas. giving us so much to take home with us in those tabletops. As an ally, I'm certainly inspired, motivated and excited. We've had an incredible day of sharing and learning. Now, how is it possible to sum up such a wonderful exchange of ideas as we look forward together for a brighter, stronger future? That job is in the hands of Catherine Moyle, a proud Gamilaroi woman who, amongst other things, is the Conscious Communities Lead at Woolyungah Indigenous Centre here at the University of Wollongong. So without further ado, if everyone could take a seat, I'd like to introduce Catherine. Catherine Moyle.
Woohoo! Go team! Yeah, as Jeremy said, and thank you so much, Jeremy, how do you sum up the day that we've had today? There's been a lot of work, a lot of relationship work. I think going back to Auntie Barb and Auntie Pat's sentiments about the referendum, I've been doing a lot of reflection about the referendum. And I remember that night, and as one friend said, it wasn't that it was a no, it was how quickly it was a no, how quickly it was declared. And I think Jeff's gone, but I'm also a big nerd. And my coping strategy was to actually download all the results for different polling booths and see which ones basically were crap. Because I needed to know where it was safe for me and for my children. And so proud that in the Illawarra, and particularly the northern suburbs, that I knew that there was safety in some way around me there. But the thing is, and there's this expectation that that was the end, that it all stopped. And I know a lot of our allies and our accomplices felt the same. But there's something that we know, having been around for a long time, collectively in our ancestral wisdom, that maybe some of you don't, and that's that the river doesn't carve its course in one day. And that if you go back to the headwaters of a river or a stream, it starts with a trickle. I think they're called the headwaters, yeah. It starts with a trickle, right? And then slowly that trickle grows. And over time, we end up carving our way through. And we know that the creek bed is there or that the river bed is there, regardless of whether or not the water flows, but that it is there. Because collectively we know, even those who said no, we collectively know what needs to happen. And we're just, unfortunately, really good at knowing that sometimes it takes time and help. And that's where you all come in. So thank you so much for that. Something else that sort of came up for me was around, I think it was Arnie Bronwyn mentioned, stay true to Uluru. Right, stay true to Uluru. Now, ultimately, and it was talked about this morning, again, that Uluru, it was an invitation from the heart. And allyship comes from the heart. It's not something that we do, it's something that we be. You know, if we want to do better, we need to collectively be better. And that really needs to stem, much like the water, the water flowing, like the drip. It comes from the heart, and that means that we don't turn it on and off. If I'm Aboriginal all of the time, and I'm pretty sure I am, then you're allies all of the time and in all contexts and in all roles. And if we collectively operate to influence whatever our sphere of influence is, whatever the spheres that we inhabit, be it a conversation at a school gate, or be it sitting on a board, or standing in front of hundreds of people. Maybe you like tattoos, I don't know. Some people, maybe you want it tattooed somewhere, I don't know. But whatever you're able to influence that, and we get there. There's a game that I play with my children, and it doesn't actually have a name, and some of you might do the same thing, right? It's something that my father used to do with us when we'd be driving around the place, If it had a name though, it would be left, right, straight ahead. Does anyone play that sort of game? You're driving with your kids. It's a little bit like urban, navigation skills, just so that they orient themselves. But the kids basically get the opportunity to take turns at, are we going left, are we going right, are we going straight ahead, or what's happening in that space? And sometimes it's just about getting home. Sometimes it's about, I might have promised them gelato because my kids, ice cream's not good enough. It's got to be gelato. We've got very good gelato in the Illawarra. So we play this game, and we've got this end goal. We've got this purpose that we're heading towards. Now, sometimes we find ourselves turned around. Sometimes, and it's usually one of the 10-year-olds because I've got twins. One of them, I think she does it deliberately, but she'll go, it's left when it's her turn. She'll make us take the wrong turn and everyone in the car goes, no, what's happening? Other times, people don't know what way they're going. Other times you might come across, and in any sort of drive, you'll come across, there'll be an accident like I heard there was this morning, there'll be a traffic jam. The lights will be out, there'll be a reason, but we don't just stop. We don't sit in traffic. It's against our nature, right? We look for a way around it. So whilst we've got all these plans and organisations, the ones that you're involved with will have reconciliation action plans or whatever sort of plan you want to call. Ours is a heart plan, and plugging that, it's going to be launched in October. So whatever the plan is, you don't just sit in traffic. If you're trying to get from point A to point B, you don't just sit. You look for another way around it. And that's my challenge for all of you, is that you keep looking. If there's resistance, you look for a way around it, because it's not this linear, it's not from A to B and straight there. If we make every decision count, if it's left, right, straight ahead, every time we come to that decision, we'll make a difference. And it won't take us the thousands of years that it takes to carve a watercourse. So if we individually operate and work to influence our spheres of influence, I need to work on that, so our spheres of influence, and if we're being really conscious about the decisions that we're making and the way that we're influencing them, then we will create huge change. It's a little bit like Valentine's Day. I often say, Valentine's Day is nice. It's nice to get flowers on Valentine's Day, but they mean so much more any other day. The referendum was just one day. Allyship today, it's just one day. What are you going to do every other day? And standing here and looking down at you all, although our numbers have depleted, knowing that there are those of you who are online, I know that we'd be getting flowers every day. And that's huge. So I guess another challenge, sorry, I like challenges, obviously. So just reflecting then on even what you're taking away from today. When you go back to your spaces, to those spheres of influence, are you just going to say, it was an absolutely amazing day? We got to hear from some amazing people, but that last speaker, she was awesome. Is that all that you're going to say? Auntie Donna's treats, I'm coming back for more. Is that all that you're going to say? Because that's what normally happens when we attend these sort of events, when we attend conferences and things. We go, yeah, the muffins were dry and I met some good people. Or are you going to take it that next step? Because I challenge you to take it that next step and to follow up with, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go left. I'm going to go right. I'm going to go straight ahead. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kath. You've brilliantly captured the spirit of the day and thrown out ultimately a big challenge to us all. For a group of us who were so battered and bruised 10 months ago, I feel today we've reached the corner. We haven't turned the corner, that's all ahead of us, but we've made some progress. To turn the corner, that's the job of us allies. Without naming you all, the most sincere thank you to all of our speakers and facilitators, the remarkable kids, uni kids, and to the team here from the University of Wollongong, especially the gang from Woolyungah and their allies, the Friends of Woolyungah. Many, many people helped make this day happen. To Holly Edwards, Michael Anderson, Jamie Beveridge, Tammy Small, Catherine Moyle, Sally Stevenson, a huge thank you. To Martin Keys and David Arnold and the production team here, a really special thank you. They've made those of us on the stage look and sound as good as we possibly can. So thanks, guys. Thanks again to the Fred Hollows Foundation, ANTAR, Australians for Native Title and Reconciliation, Oxfam and the University of Wollongong's Woolyungah Centre for your support. It's been a great example of allyship in action. Delegates, that pretty much wraps things up. As Auntie Barb said much earlier today, there's been a lot of love in this room. As an ally, I'll be leaving this room motivated, inspired, and excited about what's ahead. And that's a far cry from where I was in October. For everyone, what's left of your World Allyship Day, we hope to see you all again and many more allies when we come together again on the 8th day of the 8th month in 2025. Have a great day.
you.